Chapter 930. After Wuming made a scene with Ishtar, the four of them returned to the nearby encampment. This was a place close to the defensive barrier. Although it had not collapsed yet, many of the barriers were already in a state of collapse and were about to collapse. However, they could still be used temporarily after temporary repairs. Not only that, under the command of Nawakamaru, the soldiers also set up temporary tent-like residences adjacent to the defensive barrier. Oh, you all returned safely. I knew that nothing would happen. Merlin was the first to come out of the tent to welcome everyone. However, it seemed that you guys were a little noisy just now. I was very self-aware and didn't come out. If Merlin had also joined in, the situation would have become even more serious. It's just that the joke was a little too harsh, and someone couldn't take it. Wuming said and glanced at Ishtar. Humph. Ishtar snorted and turned her head to the side after realizing that Wuming was looking at her. Gudatsi and Matthew saw this scene and smiled helplessly and awkwardly. In short, the two people who went deep into the underworld have returned safely. Although the commander of the magical beasts, Musu Maf, was released, the other commander of the magical beasts, Wugger, was killed in the underworld for provoking the goddess of the underworld. Mashu began to report and smiled. One of the commanders of the magical beasts was killed and the other escaped, but we have 0 casualties in the end. There's no better result than this. Indeed, putting the number of enemies aside, the number of casualties on their side was the most important thing. The demons did not rush to the fortress. The collapse of the fortress was entirely the result of Ishtar's noble artifact. Therefore, the soldiers did not suffer any casualties. Needless to say, Gudatsi and the others did not suffer any casualties. The task of killing and chasing the demons was completed by Ishtar and Wuming. It was just that when Ishtar flew up, he was almost ambushed by Musu Maf. However, because Ishtar was vigilant because of Wuming's words, Musu Maf's ambush failed. Although Wuming was quite upset that Musu Maf managed to escape. Moreover, the ground here has also collapsed because of Ishtar's noble phantasm. It's directly connected to the underworld. I'm afraid that the magical beasts will have to take a detour even if they want to come here. Wuming added. It could be said that this was undoubtedly a man-made natural moat. In other words, we don't need to set up defensive facilities here? Gudatsi expressed her opinion. Even so, we have to consult with King Gilgamesh before we can make a decision. Nawakamaru walked over from the camp behind everyone and expressed his opinion. Why don't we talk in the tent? We can also let Mr. Hyunryong have a good rest. Nawakamaru pointed at the tent not far behind him. Wuming shook his head and declined. I'm not tired. I'm just taking advantage of the situation to have a chat here. After all, they were almost all here. If there was anything, they could just stand there and simply summarize it. There was no need to sit down and have a formal discussion. Besides, we do have to consult with Gil. Besides, I have something to report. I'm going to return to Uruk immediately. Gudatsi was stunned when she heard Wuming's words. Then what should we do? Gudatsi and the others originally received the first order given to them by King Gilgamesh to go to the jungle in the southwest to help the Quetzalcoatl. However, they didn't even see the Quetzalcoatl's face before they were led by Wuming to the Abif Mountains in the northwest. They were directly across the Mesopotamia. The first order was such a mess. Not to mention, Gudatsi and the others couldn't continue to stay here. Even if they didn't go to Uruk with Wuming, they had to return to the jungle in the southwest. The most important thing was that Anna was still there. Senior Villo, why don't you send us back to the jungle? Matthew felt that since Ishtar had been recruited, they should go back and meet up with Anna. I'm not going to leave you here. Come back to Uruk with me. After Wuming finished speaking, he looked at Ishtar. You also come back to Uruk with us to see Gil. Ishtar was dumbfounded. Hey? In Uruk City, in a corner near the Divine Tower, dark purple ripples suddenly appeared. Wuming, Gudatsi, Matthew, Anna, Merlin, and Ishtar, who was very reluctant but didn't dare to say anything, walked out of it. Although Ishtar was very reluctant, Wuming ordered her to come with them, saying that she had to discuss with Gilgamesh about the crusade against the monsters. Although the price was that Ishtar had been verbally attacking Wuming along the way, after arriving at the jungle in the southwest, Wuming and Ishtar were alone for a while. Gudatsi and the others didn't know what happened, but Ishtar became much more obedient after returning to the team. After that, Wuming found Anna, but because he still didn't see the Quetzalcoatl, Wuming left a message and took the 5 of them back to Uruk through the portal. Oh! Once again, we reached our destination in an instant. Gudatsi exclaimed in surprise. No matter when I see it, Senior Villo's ability is always so magical. Matthew seemed to be enjoying himself. BZZT, BZZT, BZZT. Every time you enter this strange space, the connection between you and Chaldea will become abnormal. BZZT, BZZT, BZZT. Roman's voice was heard from Gudatsi's bracelet along with the abnormal signal. Villo's ability is probably different from spatial magic and teleportation magic. It's not something that humans can use, so it's normal that Chaldea can't detect it. Even Merlin was very interested in Wuming's ability. If he didn't know that Wuming would be perfunctory, he would have asked him a long time ago. Anyway, it's better to be able to get to our destination as soon as possible. Anna sighed. She looked quite tired. She couldn't help it. She was only there to help, and after a long journey to the jungle in the southwest, she was left alone. Although she was the one who asked for it after that, before she could see the Quetzalcoatl, and before she could do anything useful, she was picked up by Wuming and returned to Uruk. Anyone would be unhappy if they were in her shoes. Ma. Anna, don't be sad. Returning to Uruk means that you can eat delicious butter cake for dinner. Merlin, who thought he was showing a kind big brother smile, looked at Anna as if she was a kidnapper. Gudatsi and Matthew couldn't help but protect Anna behind them, watching Merlin with vigilance. You look very suspicious, Merlin. Mr. Merlin, please behave yourself. The two were like parents protecting their child, and they mocked Merlin with disdain. This made Merlin feel quite hurt. You are being disdained, Merlin. Wuming also joined in. Ma. Merlin didn't know what to say. He could only smile and shrug his shoulders. After a few seconds of silence, everyone couldn't help but burst into laughter. It's important to be able to maintain a happy mood in the singularity, but you guys shouldn't always bully Merlin, because I always feel the same way. This was the speech of Roman from Chaldea, who was given a pessimist, a coward, and other negative titles by a large number of servants. Huh? What is this speech of a soft-footed shrimp that does not know how to read the atmosphere? Said Ishtar in a rare moment. After all, after being taught a lesson by Wuming, Ishtar didn't speak again, or rather, she didn't dare to speak again. However, when Ishtar opened her mouth, she was still annoyed. By the way, what's the matter with the tent? There were no tents in Mesopotamia before I left. Wuming suddenly remembered the temporary residences that Nuwakamaru commanded the soldiers to build before. Those residences were all tents, which gave people the feeling of a military camp. After all, Mesopotamia was made of clay, and the materials and cloth needed for tents were still scarce. However, if Gilgamesh wanted to, he could definitely invent such a thing. But even if there was, most of the tents would be replaced with sheepskin. However, that would be a little bit extravagant, and it might not make ends meet. That was why there were no tents in Mesopotamia. About that, I heard that it was an invention brought by Zhuge Kongming's military advisor. Matthew heard some rumors about it. Some people said that it was contributed by the king's military advisor. In other words, the main consciousness of Zhuge Kongming is Ermero too? Gudatsi was stunned. If the other party brought an item that didn't exist in this era, then why couldn't they determine the other party's background before? No, it's hard to say. Zhuge Kongming also had tents during the Three Kingdoms period. After all, the army needed to be stationed when marching to war. Wu Ming thought of such a possibility. If you think about it carefully, it really doesn't look like something like a modern tent. Matthew nodded. Moreover, in Matthew's opinion, whether it was Ermero II or Zhuge Kongming who was the main consciousness, both of them could do this. After all, no matter who was the main consciousness, both of them had knowledge about military tents. Both of them could use their professional skills to create military tents, which were convenient places to live in the wild. It was better to teach a man how to fish than to give him a fish. After making a sample, the construction method would be taught to the soldiers, and then all they needed to do was mass-produce the materials. What is the background of that person? Merlin must know, but he didn't tell us. What a disappointment! Gudatsi let out a sad cry and looked at Merlin with complaining eyes. After all, if Merlin told the truth, they wouldn't be so concerned. Ah! Don't worry, it's best to find out for yourself. And we'll be able to see the other party soon, so there's no need to rush. Merlin was still thick-skinned. Sure enough, Merlin is terrible. As expected of Anna, her words were still so sharp. As if ignoring Roman, the few of them chatted as they slowly walked towards the divine pagoda. Only Roman, who was in Chaldea, looked like he couldn't be revived. So I've been ignored. After that, Leonardo da Vinci, who was drinking coffee, smiled helplessly. You have to pull yourself together, Romani. You have to eat your own fruit. Although Leonardo da Vinci's eyes were overflowing with joy. Yes, while Roman was being comforted by Leonardo da Vinci, because the location of the portal was very close to the Tower of God, Wu Ming and the others had already stepped into the Tower of God. The soldiers they met along the way all showed surprise and respect to Wu Ming and Ishtar, but after seeing that the two brought people from the Chaldean embassy, they were worried that their greetings would delay the other party's important matters, so the soldiers didn't say anything to Wu Ming and Ishtar. However, they also bowed respectfully to Wu Ming and Ishtar before they obediently left. Sure enough, assassin as a Hyunryong is very popular in the Uruk. After another soldier silently left, Gudatsi suddenly spoke. After all, I'm a Uruk Hyunryong, and I'm completely different from Ishtar when I'm a god. I've always taken care of the humans. Seems like that's true? Matthew recalled the situation just now. The soldiers were indeed very respectful to Wu Ming and Ishtar, but the way they looked at the two of them was different. They were respectful and grateful to Wu Ming from the bottom of their hearts, but when the soldiers looked at Ishtar, it was as if they were looking at a high and mighty god who could not be offended. Although both were respectful, they were actually not the same. Ahem. But, I can see that the Uruk soldiers also respect you, Miss Ishtar, Matthew immediately added after being pushed by Gudatsi. However, this could not cover up the fact that even Ishtar had to admit. However, this fact made Ishtar even angrier. So what if it's different? I don't need their respect anyway. The humans only need to offer me gems and gold, Ishtar said as she sped up and walked toward the room at the top where Gilgamesh was dealing with matters. This made everyone feel ashamed. Don't worry about her. She'll be fine after a while. Let's go. The place where Gil is dealing with matters is right in front of us. According to the current situation of this world, he should be staying there forever. When they arrived at the door at the top of the Divine Tower, the soldiers guarding the door were shocked when they saw Wu Ming and Ishtar. They immediately knelt down respectfully. Lord Hyunryong, Lord Ishtar, welcome back to the Uruk. Wu Ming had indeed left because of the battle with Gorgon, and Ishtar had left the Uruk because she was always running around. She was often not in the Uruk. In short, the two of them were indeed welcome back. Is the king inside? Wu Ming asked the two soldiers who stood up. Yes, Lord Hyunryong. King Gilgamesh is dealing with matters. Lord Siduri and Lord Baiching are also inside. However, this was just a routine inquiry. After all, the door was so big that Wu Ming had already seen the situation inside. Gilgamesh sat on the throne, constantly picking up and putting down the slate and quickly dealing with matters. Siduri stood beside Gilgamesh to help record things. As for Musasobo Benkei, he stood under the throne with his eyes closed, waiting quietly. "Let's go," Wuming said as he took the lead and walked into the room at the top of the divine tower where Gilgamesh dealt with government affairs. Chapter 931. On the king's throne, Gilgamesh, assisted by Siduri, was efficiently handling the various matters on the clay tablets. "Oh, Hyunryong, you're back." Even when he saw that the visitor was Wuming, Gilgamesh didn't put down the clay tablet in his hand. Instead, he looked at the clay tablet while chatting with Wuming. Siduri slightly bowed to Wuming and Ishtar. She couldn't interrupt the conversation between the king and the god at this moment. Moreover, she still needed to classify the clay tablets that Gilgamesh processed, so she couldn't get away for a while. "After all, I was tricked by Gorgon. How can I not come back?" Wuming responded to Gilgamesh with a gentle smile. "Ah yes, it's not in your character to not respond to Gorgon." Gilgamesh put down the clay tablet in his hand. This was the last one that needed to be processed. Afterward, Gilgamesh raised his head and looked at Wuming, one high and one low, and smiled. If people who didn't know saw this scene, they would probably think that this was a beautiful scene of the king and his subjects having a heart-to-heart talk. However, Gudatsi felt that something was wrong. It was as if Gorgon, who Wuming and Gilgamesh were thinking about, was going to be in big trouble. Then, Gilgamesh looked at Siduri, who had already sorted the clay tablets. "Siduri, pass the processed clay tablets to the various departments." "Yes, King, I'll do it right away." After Siduri bowed, she and the guards ran down from the king's throne with a portion of the clay tablets. Just when she passed by Wuming and Ishtar, Siduri paused again and bowed to the two of them. Unlike Gilgamesh, Siduri still respected the gods, especially the Uruk Hyunryong and the Uruk city god Ishtar. "Oh, isn't this the stupid goddess who ran away from home? How did you know to come back today?" Gilgamesh tilted his body and supported his chin with one hand as if he had just noticed Ishtar. His tone was full of sarcasm. Ishtar would definitely explode if she heard Gilgamesh's words, but Wuming glared at Ishtar, indicating that she shouldn't mess around and stay put. Like a powder keg that had expanded to the limit but couldn't explode, Ishtar pouted, clasped her hands, and turned her head away. There was even a faint mist above her head. "Oh, looks like you've trained this stupid goddess well, Hyunryong." Gilgamesh was surprised by Ishtar's forbearance. Although he didn't show it on his face, Gilgamesh was actually very surprised. After all, anyone who knew Ishtar knew that she and Gilgamesh were the most incompatible. Even Wuming's relationship with Ishtar was better than Gilgamesh's relationship with Ishtar. But in the face of Gilgamesh's sarcasm and ridicule, Ishtar actually endured it. If it weren't for the fact that Ishtar's divinity in front of him really belonged to Ishtar, Gilgamesh would have thought that someone was pretending to be Ishtar. "I just used some small tricks, King. I think if it were you, you would have guessed my tricks even if I tried to hide them." In an instant, Gilgamesh understood what Wuming meant by tricks. It was nothing more than starting with Ishtar's weakness, probably using money to coerce her. That was indeed the case. When Ishtar knew that she would be forced by Wuming to follow him to the Uruk, Ishtar cursed Wuming and all kinds of rumors and slanders blurted out. Although it wasn't to an amazing extent, after Gudatsi, Matthew, and others heard it, it could be said that it changed the image of Ishtar in their hearts. After that, Wuming briefly separated Ishtar from the crowd in the southwest jungle. During this period, Wuming said something to Ishtar. "If you can listen to me obediently and keep your mouth shut, I will fight for 1/10 of the Babylon treasury for you as your reward." This made Ishtar's eyes suddenly shine, but Wuming's request was not that simple. "Of course, if you can hold back when facing Gil, I will fight for 1/10 of the Babylon treasury for you as an additional reward. However, if you don't listen to me and can't hold back, all these rewards will be cancelled, and your original rewards will be reduced by half. The first half of the sentence made Ishtar's eyes shine even brighter, but the second half of the sentence made Ishtar's eyes shine even brighter. Ishtar began to calculate in her heart. If everything went well, she could finally get 25% of the treasures in the Babylon treasury, which was a quarter. However, if it didn't go well, she could only get less than 10% of the treasures, which was directly reduced from a quarter to a 20th. It's easy, right? Just don't lose your temper and be obedient, and you will have a chance to get 25% of the treasures in the Babylon treasury. If you lose your temper and don't listen to me, you will only be left with 5% of the treasures. Although 5% of the treasures is indeed a lot, it is not even 10%. Tsk. Wuming's words echoed around Ishtar, whose eyes began to spin. Gradually, Ishtar, who could not resist the temptation, chose to fall into the devil's trap. Ishtar covered her head, and her eyes were downcast as she finally made the final decision. Ah! I know. I will be obedient. The power of money once again played its role. In short, Gilgamesh's guess was not far from the truth. Gudatsi and the others thought that Ishtar had become so obedient because of the influence of the forced contract. Who would have thought that Wuming would still use money and treasures to make Ishtar choose to compromise? This king is so happy today. This king will not pursue the crime of abducting Chaldea that this king sent to support the Quetzalcoatl. Gilgamesh could not help but look at the Chaldea led by Gudatsi. Although they were Chaldea, only Gudatsi and Matthew could be considered as Chaldea's people. Anna was brought by Merlin, and Merlin was only sent by Gilgamesh to support Gudatsi and Matthew. Although Olga Marie and her vampire follower Parmelia had completed their seclusion at the end of the previous singularity, according to Roman's explanation, the Holy Grail that sealed the entire concept of Florence underwent a mutation. Something followed the demon god pillar Florence and groped its way to Chaldea. Chapter 932. Although Chaldea was located in the Antarctic continent, other than Chaldea, all other places were burned by Gidea. Therefore, Chaldea, which survived under the influence of the magnetic field, could be said to be an alternative singularity. When everyone in the world is crazy, and only one person is sober, the one who is sober is the crazy one. That was more or less the case. When the whole world was burned by Gidea, Chaldea, which was lucky enough to survive, became an existence similar to a singularity. To put it simply, Chaldea could no longer be regarded as an institution that still existed in the Antarctic continent. Chaldea should be treated as an existence similar to other singularities. Therefore, if someone wanted to invade Chaldea, they must first find Chaldea. However, this was full of difficulties. The reason why Chaldea was able to discover singularities was because Chaldea had three important things: Earth Environment Model Chaldea, Yasnir Future Observation Lens, Sheba Psychic Calculation Device, Trismegistes. With the cooperation of the three, singularities could be discovered, and through Chaldea's psychic transfer technology, human masters could be sent to various eras. If one wanted to discover the location of Chaldea, they probably didn't need to go through so much trouble. However, Chaldea wasn't easy to discover either. However, probably because Chaldea took in Floros, who was sealed in the Golden Holy Grail by Wuming, some unknown existence used this as a medium to discover Chaldea. Currently, it was on its way to Chaldea. The existence in a certain location was probably Gidea. Wuming thought so. However, Wuming thought that this was impossible. Floros was sealed by his own power, coupled with the influence of Chaldea's magnetic field. It was impossible for Gidea to discover him. Unless Gaia had become even more powerful, she would be able to find the current location of Floros through her previous relationship with him. Fortunately, because Chaldea's equipment was quite advanced, they discovered it in time. After that, Olga Marie used her half-mature third method to cooperate with her vampire follower, Parmelia, to add an additional layer of seal to the Holy Grail that sealed Floros, preventing the unknown existence from advancing. However, the price was that Olga Marie and Parmelia couldn't leave the golden Holy Grail that sealed Floros for the time being. Therefore, Roman was still the commander, and Parmelia couldn't go to the Singularity in Mesopotamia with Gudazzi and Matthew. However, if Olga Marie was the commander in Chaldea, there was a high chance that she would quarrel with Gilgamesh. After all, with Olga Marie's temper, how could she tolerate Gilgamesh making Gudazzi and Matthew spend so much time doing odd jobs? Fortunately, Roman was the temporary commander. After all, Roman's personality was more gentle. For example, at this moment, Roman, who was monitoring in Chaldea, was in a mess because of Gilgamesh's speech. What should we do? Leonardo da Vinci? I guessed that King Gilgamesh would be angry? On the contrary, Leonardo da Vinci was quite calm. Isn't the villa still with Tachika and the others? Don't worry, Wuming wouldn't let Gudazzi and Matthew be punished, but in fact, Gilgamesh had no intention of punishing the two at all. However, he still had to say what needed to be said. Wuming walked in front of Gudazzi and Matthew and looked at Gilgamesh defensively. I was the one who made them change their plan, and they also had a part to play in getting Ishtar to join us. Yes, this can be considered as making up for their mistakes. Merlin also stood beside Gudazzi and the others and said something good. Although Ishtar is a stupid goddess, she is still somewhat useful. However, it is true that she has violated this king's will, and Hyunryong was the one who instigated her to do so. Logically speaking, she should be guilty of the same crime. Hearing this, Ishtar, whose back was facing Gilgamesh, tried her best to hold back her anger. In the end, she couldn't stand it anymore and said, "I'm going out for a walk, Uruk. Don't worry about me." Then she flew away. You stupid goddess? Gilgamesh's anger was completely understandable. That's right, Ishtar summoned the horse Anna to break through the ceiling again. This king will remember it on your head, Hyunryong. Gilgamesh stared at Wuming with annoyance. However, this king will not delay the proper business. That will be your punishment. In fact, Gilgamesh often used his clairvoyance to see things when he took a short break. Coincidentally, Gilgamesh inadvertently saw the matter between Wuming and Gudazzi and the others. Therefore, Gilgamesh knew very well that Gudazzi and Matthew did not actually see the contents of the slate that he asked the small pterosaur to send to the south. In fact, Gilgamesh only wanted to train Gudazzi and Matthew. After all, the two of them were really immature and needed more training. Gilgamesh once heard from Merlin that Gudazzi and Matthew had received a lot of help from Wuming along the way. The two of them missed a lot of opportunities to train. Although this did make the path they took less difficult, Gilgamesh would make up for the lack of training along the way in his Uruk for Gudazzi and Matthew. It is true that you did not follow this king's orders. Now listen to this king of Chaldea. Gilgamesh's voice suddenly became louder, which made Gudazzi and Matthew straighten their backs. It seemed that they were going to be punished. Yes. Gudazzi and Matthew responded in unison. You have indeed made a certain contribution in welcoming back the Uruk god, but you did not have the slightest effect on stopping the demonic beasts that crossed over the northwest mountains. Therefore, your merits cannot offset your faults. Siduri will arrange a new task for you later. Now, go back to your Chaldean embassy and rest. Gudazzi and Matthew, who originally thought that they would be severely punished by Gilgamesh, were stunned. The punishment given by Gilgamesh was probably quite mild. Is there a problem? Seeing the two stunned, Gilgamesh looked down at them with his scarlet eyes. This cold and harsh gaze made Gudazzi and Matthew come back to their senses. Yes. No problem. Gilgamesh nodded with satisfaction, then looked at Merlin and Anna. Merlin, this king does not want to comment on your dereliction of duty. you will be punished the same as Chaldea. As for Anna, that's it. You may leave. Chapter 933. Yes, thank you, King Gilgamesh, for your magnanimity. Merlin bowed to Gilgamesh with his cane, but he didn't leave. Instead, he stood aside and waited quietly. Anna didn't speak. She just bowed slightly to Gilgamesh, then left the throne room. She was just a follower, abducted by Merlin. It was only because of the agreement with Merlin that Anna obediently stayed in Uruk. And Gilgamesh also recognized Anna's identity. Therefore, the bow to Gilgamesh was just for show. More importantly, compared to the throne room, which was filled with the unique aura of clay tablets, she preferred the flower shop owned by a kind old lady in Uruk. Not only because of the fragrance of the flower shop, but also because Anna felt warmth in the flower shop. At this time, Matthew stood up and asked, "That King Gilgamesh, the Hyunryong, where is Sir? Is he not with us?" It seemed that Matthew was still a little unaccustomed to Wuming's name in this singularity. Gudatsi was also concerned about Wuming's punishment. After all, only Wuming wasn't punished or ordered by Gilgamesh. How could she rest assured? This king and Hyunryong have other important matters to discuss. You don't have to ask. However, immediately afterward, Merlin leaned over to Gudatsi and Matthew and whispered. Ignoring Merlin's actions, Gilgamesh turned his head and looked at Musasobo Benkei, who stood aside without saying a word. Also, Lackner Musasobo Benkei, who was silent and seemingly inconspicuous, responded to Gilgamesh. Yes, King Gilgamesh, Lackner Musasobo Benkei is here. With one hand on the razor, Musasobo Benkei knelt on one knee in front of Gilgamesh. As you can see, Hyunryong and others have resolved the crisis in the northwest and returned to Uruk. You can rest assured. Yes, yes, King Gilgamesh. Musasobo Benkei looked a little absent-minded. With the strength of his legs, Musasobo Benkei quickly returned to the Uruk to report to Gilgamesh. However, when Musasobo Benkei met with Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh calmly told Musasobo Benkei not to worry. Hyunryong and Ishtar have already resolved it. You just wait here. After Gilgamesh left such a sentence, Musasobo Benkei was left in the throne of the God Tower by Gilgamesh. This made Musasobo Benkei feel quite conflicted. As for what he was conflicted about, to be honest, Musasobo Benkei didn't know himself. Ever since he escaped from Operation Decapitation, Musasobo Benkei felt a little lost in his heart. Musasobo Benkei feared that history would repeat itself. Although he did save Nuwakamaru, that was only because Nuwakamaru was close to him. As a subject, he couldn't watch Nuwakamaru die at such a close distance. However, in other words, if the distance was far, perhaps Musasobo Benkei would abandon Nuwakamaru and escape alone, just like Lord Haifeng of Changlu, who abandoned the Minamoto Sutra and escaped. He didn't want to see that scene and didn't want history to repeat itself. However, he was indeed afraid of facing the demonic beast commander. Regarding this, Musasobo Benkei was confused. Gilgamesh, who saw Musasobo Benkei's confusion, lost interest in Musasobo Benkei. No matter what, a soldier could only be called a qualified soldier if he was undistracted. The Uruk soldiers were full of faith in fighting against the demonic beasts and protecting their families. As for Musasobo Benkei, although he was stronger than the Uruk soldiers, his heart was not firm. Gilgamesh definitely wouldn't use such a person. If he gave an important mission to him, it would definitely ruin things in the end. Moreover, the risk brought by Musasobo Benkei's confusion was far more than that. At present, it was just that there was no fuse. If there was a fuse, the impact of the explosion would make Musasobo Benkei leave the Uruk silently like a walking corpse. Although he would eventually recover as a heroic spirit, the danger brought by the demonic beasts was too dangerous. The lack of any combat power would put the human side at a disadvantage. Therefore, Gilgamesh couldn't leave Musasobo Benkei alone. Keeping Musasobo Benkei was the temporary solution to deal with this unstable factor. Speaking of unstable factors, Ibaraki Boy, who escaped and occupied the mountain, was also one of them. 3 months ago, Ibaraki Boy was among the 10 servants who carried out the beheading operation. Gilgamesh couldn't help but recall the situation at that time. Because the situation at that time was very bad, after one of the demonic beast commanders, Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao, attacked the Uruk, and Okita Soki's spiritual base collapsed and left, Gilgamesh immediately planned the beheading operation against the demonic beast commander. He summoned servants to form an assassination team to assassinate the demonic beast commander. The strength of the servants only needed to be able to get close to and kill the demonic beast commander, because this was a group of Suicide Squad. And Gilgamesh's Suicide Squad certainly couldn't let go of Ibaraki Boy, who was still occupying the mountain. Therefore, Gilgamesh summoned 7 new servants early in the morning and let Shiro Amakusa lead the team to carry out the plan to kill Ibaraki Boy. Ibaraki Boy was a super unstable factor. Even if he didn't join the Suicide Squad as a consumable, he couldn't be left alive and must be eliminated. And Shiro Amakusa and the others, because Zhuge Kongming followed them, plus the strength of the servants, they directly captured Ibaraki Boy and brought him back to the Uruk. After setting a curse on Ibaraki Boy's spiritual base that could make it explode, Ibaraki Boy naturally entered the Suicide Squad and carried out the beheading operation. This was probably what was meant by waste. By the way, during the beheading operation, Ibaraki Boy was in the same team as Ba Yuzan and Shiro Amakusa. After all, even if the curse was used to threaten Ibaraki Boy's spiritual base, it couldn't be considered that everything was fine. Ibaraki Boy was a berserker. Therefore, Ibaraki Boy formed a team with 2 rather steady people. Those 2 people were Ba Yuzan and Shiro Amakusa. However, even if there were 2 steady people watching over Ibaraki Boy still made a mess in the end. Ba Yuzan and one of the demonic beast commanders, the Scorpion Man Kitabliru, died together. Chapter 934. Because of Ibaraki Dojo's mischief, the Scorpion Man Kitabliru used his stinger to hit Ba Yuqian, causing Ba Yuqian to be seriously injured. Ba Yuqian knew that his spirit core had been destroyed, so he decided to take Kitabliru down with him. As for Ibaraki Dojo, Shiro Amakusa definitely wouldn't let him go. Although the servants who carried out the decapitation operation didn't think of returning to Uruk alive, killing a few more demonic beast commanders was good. In the end, because of Ibaraki Dojo's influence, Ba Yuqian had no choice but to take Ibaraki Dojo down with him. If it wasn't for the insurance method engraved on Ibaraki Dojo's spirit core exploding to cover for Shiro Amakusa, allowing Shiro Amakusa to take the opportunity to escape from the demonic beast horde, he probably wouldn't have been able to escape. Again, they were a Suicide Squad. After agreeing to Gilgamesh's plan, the servants who carried out the decapitation operation had already disregarded life and death. The reason why Shiro Amakusa cherished his life so much was because he had to do his best to kill as many demonic beast commanders as possible. Everything was for the sake of humanity. It turned out that the servants were worthy of being called heroes in human history. Yagyu, one of the strongest swordsmen in the Jianghu era, Ma Shou, Zhongmo, and the ancestor of martial arts in the East, Kusalaku, worked together to kill Kusalaku, who had great brute strength. However, the 2 of them were also seriously injured. Extreme strength could overwhelm all techniques, and that was what Kusalaku did. Although the 2 spirit cores were intact, their spirit cores were completely destroyed. They were completely defeated by the remaining demonic beast. Foma Kotaro and Katu Duanzo, who were also wind demon ninjas, used ninjutsu to deal with the formless Omu Daburutu, who was known as the Tempest. However, with the help of Shiro Amakusa, the three of them managed to kill Omu Dabirutu by taking him down with them. However, although the servants were killing one by one, the demonic beast commanders weren't that easy to kill. Even with Zhuge Kongming's plan, which scattered the demonic beast commanders one by one, and catching them off guard, the servants still managed to kill the demonic beast commanders by taking them down with them. However, at this time, the other demonic beast commanders finally discovered the problem. So, the demonic beast commanders began to surround the remaining servants and surround them, preparing to annihilate them in one fell swoop. At that time, through the connection between Gilgamesh and the servants, Gilgamesh remotely received the news that several demonic beast commanders were successfully killed, but at the same time, he lost contact with those servants. No one knew what Gilgamesh was thinking at that time. He was still dealing with government affairs. Gilgamesh knew very well that the servants he sent out had no ability to break through the encirclement of countless demonic beasts. Even if they could break through the encirclement, they would still be hunted down by the demonic beast. There was no way they would be able to return to the North Wall in time. And Gilgamesh wouldn't deploy a large number of soldiers to support a few servants because it was likely that a large number of soldiers would be sacrificed. However, because the strength of these servants was not enough, Gilgamesh could maintain so many servants at one time. If they were like Wuming, the amount of servants he provided would be more than enough for Gilgamesh to go to the underworld. However, although Gilgamesh's heart was heavy, he didn't regret it. The so-called heroic spirits were existences that fought for the future of humanity. They were existences that risked everything for the sake of humanity. The so-called Suicide Squad proved this point. It was precisely because they understood that they would not be able to return that the servants agreed to form a Suicide Squad. Fortunately, Gudatsi and the others came late. If they came early, perhaps they wouldn't have allowed such a thing to happen. After all, whether it was Gudatsi or Matthew, they were quite emotional people. However, it was precisely because of such human beings that the servants rushed into the demonic beasts without hesitation. Glancing at Gudatsi and Matthew, who continued to whisper to Merlin, Gilgamesh showed a puzzled look. After returning to his senses, Gilgamesh looked at Musasobo Benkei again. The fact that Musasobo Benkei and Nawakamaru could survive was also within Gilgamesh's expectation. He saw it through his clairvoyance. Berserker Darius III, who teamed up with Musasobo Benkei and Nawakamaru, was accidentally discovered by the demonic beast commander. Nawakamaru wanted to kill the demonic beast commander recklessly. Musasobo Benkei had a fear of death, but because he was unwilling to abandon his former master in front of him to die again, he resolutely took Nawakamaru and fled the battlefield when Darius III couldn't hold on anymore. They successfully survived along the Tigris River. However, Nawakamaru, who survived, regained her fighting spirit. In order to make up for her failure, she continued to work hard under Gilgamesh to complete the tasks given to her by Gilgamesh. Since then, Musasobo Benkei had changed. To put it nicely, he had lost the motivation to continue fighting. To put it bluntly, he had become a soulless zombie. At this moment, Musasobo Benkei's expression was like this. Seeing this scene, Gilgamesh couldn't help but frown. But this doesn't mean that this king doesn't need to set up a stronghold in the northwest. Set off immediately and return to the temporary stronghold in the northwest. Rendezvous with Ryder and wait for this king's subsequent orders. Sure enough, Gilgamesh couldn't stand such an expression. It was too disgusting. A hero who left his name in human history should look like a hero. Yes, King Gilgamesh, Musasobo Benkei replied, then left the tower without stopping. Then, Gilgamesh looked at Merlin, Gudatsi, and Matthew, who were still muttering non-stop. What are you muttering about? Return to the Chaldean embassy and rest as soon as possible. Yes, then, King, I'll take my leave first. But Tachika and Matthew seem to have something to discuss with you and Lord Hyunryong. I won't disturb you. Merlin finished speaking and left by himself. Is that so? Gilgamesh looked at Gudotsi and Matthew. Then, what else do you want? That. Gudotsi smiled awkwardly. What was there to discuss? Merlin clearly said that he could see Zhuge Kongming if he stayed, but in the end, he sold her and Matthew out. Why don't we let Tachika follow? After all, she is Chaldea's ambassador to Uruk. Wuming suggested half-jokingly. Some things could indeed involve Chaldea's people. Forget it. This king is in a good mood today. This king and Hyunryong are going somewhere. If you don't want to return to the Chaldean embassy to rest, you can choose to follow. Gudotsi and Matthew's eyes lit up. If Merlin was right, they should be able to see Zhuge Kongming next. Yes, King Gilgamesh. It would be our pleasure. Chapter 935. After Gilgamesh finished speaking, he walked down from the throne and walked straight to the door. Hurry up and catch up. This king won't be responsible if you fall behind. Let's go. Wuming patted Gudotsi and Matthew's shoulders and smiled. Don't be fooled by Gil's words. If we really don't catch up, he won't care about us. Even if it was Wuming, the result would be the same. Gilgamesh was a man of his words. Isn't that bad? Matthew had a new understanding of King Gilgamesh's willfulness. But Gil will definitely slow down and pretend to wait for us. He has changed from the arrogant hero king to the existence sitting on the throne of the king of men. Gilgamesh is now a veritable sage king. Wuming praised Gilgamesh in a disguised way. Idiot, don't talk too much. Hurry up and catch up. This king won't slow down. Yes. We'll catch up. Gudotsi and Matthew ran toward the exit in a panic. Wuming smiled helplessly, shrugged his shoulders, and followed. Just like that, the last person left the throne room. The empty throne room was illuminated by the rays of the setting sun, making it look exceptionally beautiful. Gilgamesh walked out of the tower, but he didn't go directly to the main road. Instead, he went around to the back of the tower and gently pressed somewhere at the bottom of the tower. A stone wall protruded and slowly rose like a stone door. A dim passage appeared in front of Gilgamesh. Without the slightest hesitation, Gilgamesh stepped inside. However, Gudotsi and Matthew, who followed Gilgamesh, were a little confused. They had been in Uruk for a while, but it was the first time they saw such a place. Was it an important institution? Although Gudotsi and Matthew didn't recognize it, Wuming recognized it. I see. No wonder you didn't see Zhuge Kongming. He's probably here, Wuming explained as he walked behind Gudotsi and Matthew. In here. The two were stunned when they heard Wuming's words. So there was such a secret room in Mesopotamia. However, this isn't a secret room. How do I explain this? Anyway, you'll know when you go in. Wuming spread his hands and walked to the stone door that was still open. By the way, this is the passage to the place where I used to live, Wuming said as he pointed to the passage behind the stone door. The passage to the place where you used to live? The two were a little confused. I'll explain as we walk. The stone door will automatically close if we delay for too long, Wuming said as he walked into the passage. Oh, it's semi-automatic. Gudotsi sighed. At that moment, the stone door made a sound of friction and swayed as it fell. It looked like it was about to close. Say, Senior? The stone door seems to be closing. Matthew was shocked. If this continued, they would probably be locked outside. Senior, I'm sorry. Matthew exclaimed as he grabbed Gudotsi's arm and ran toward the stone door. Matthew, slow down. Matthew changed from holding Gudotsi with one hand to holding Gudotsi in his arms. He walked briskly to the half-closed stone door. With inertia, Matthew held Gudotsi and slid into the half-closed stone door. Then, the stone door happened to close completely. Great, Senior, we're in. Matthew first took a deep breath, then looked at Gudotsi in his arms. However, Gudatzi's state at the moment was very similar to the feeling of being squeezed by Matthew's chest. She looked a little dizzy. Say, Senior, are you okay? Matthew grabbed Gudatzi's shoulder and shook desperately. Gudatzi immediately pressed Matthew's hand. I'm fine, Matthew, just a little dizzy. If Matthew continued to shake, it would not be as simple as dizziness. At this time, the passage that was dim because of the closed stone door suddenly lit up. Sorry, actually I closed the stone door and startled you. After all, it was a passage leading to his former residence. The method of opening and closing was naturally in the hands of Wuming. The dragon horn on Wuming's head emitted a white light that was not dazzling, which was just enough to illuminate the surroundings. Gudatzi and Matthew both looked at Wuming silently, or rather, they stared at him and made an ambiguous sound. Wuming realized that his joke might have gone too far, and his face became serious. Ahem. I'm just urging you to hurry up. Okay, let's go, Gil is in front, we can't delay for too long. As Wuming said, he turned around with a face full of shame and began to walk down the passage. Gudatzi and Matthew were not that angry, so they followed Wuming closely. In order to divert their attention, Wuming began to talk about the origin of this passage. When I first came to the Uruk was still ruled by King Lugarbanda. As the god who protected the Uruk, I hid in a cave. I basically walked around with the dolls I made, or observed the entire Uruk through the statues in my temple. This passage leads to the cave where I hid. Vilo, senpai, why did you hide? Matthew was quite puzzled. The gods' generation was an era where humans and gods coexisted. It was reasonable to say that there was no need to hide. Also, even if you wanted to hide, why did you choose to hide in a cave? You were the god of Sumer at that time, right? This sentence was transmitted from Gudatzi's wristband, which was Roman's speech in Chaldea. The reason I needed to hide was very simple. It was because I was injured at that time. As for why I hid in a cave, it was simply because I had no place to go. Although the first half of Wuming's sentence aroused everyone's curiosity, they could still understand it. However, the second half of the sentence attracted everyone's attention and puzzlement. No place to go? Gudatzi and Matthew did not understand what he meant. However, Roman, who was sitting in Chaldea's control room, seemed to have guessed something. He looked at Leonardo da Vinci beside him in disbelief, as if asking for confirmation. The genius Leonardo da Vinci naturally understood Roman's meaning and nodded, indicating that Roman should continue. That, the reason why there was no place to go, could it be that you are a foreign god? Chapter 936. A foreign god? Gudatzi paused for a moment. What did this mean? Doctor, are you saying that the Vilo Senior is not Sumer's native god? Wuming was not surprised by Roman's conjecture. After all, he did not intend to hide his identity as a foreign god. Let's not talk about anything else. Just the fact that he has multiple identities in history proves that the Vilo is not a simple existence. At the very least, he is not a native god. Sumer's native gods were born from faith. After the gods retreated, these gods also disappeared. Only Wuming, who was not a native god, could survive in other eras. Of course, it was only a possibility that he could survive in other eras. However, Wuming had left his shadow in many places in history. Cyrus, Sodric, Vilo Cyrus Ed, Hyunryong, even if he was a foreign god, once he accepted the natives' faith, it would still have a serious impact after the gods disappeared. However, Wuming acted as if nothing had happened and left traces in human history. Roman guessed that Wuming's traces probably existed in the modern era as well. It was just that they had not been discovered. After all, Wuming had personally admitted that he was not dead. That's right. Roman's analysis is correct. I am actually a foreign god. Wuming admitted it naturally. You really are a foreign god. Gudazzi thought it was a joke. Because I protected the Uruk, the humans of the Uruk, and even Mesopotamia classified me as a Sumer god. Even so, the disappearance of the gods will not have much impact on me. When Wuming's power was insufficient in the past, he was restricted when he used his real body in the modern era. He had to be careful. However, now, Wuming did not have to be careful at all. This was because Wuming's status had reached the limit of the world. The world could no longer restrict Wuming. After all, Wuming was one step away from adulthood. However, this step could no longer rely on the accumulation of time. He had to find another way. Will Tachika hate me because I am a foreign god? Wuming suddenly turned around and looked at Gudazzi. However, this immediately received a response from Gudazzi. How is that possible? Assassin is assassin. Is she a god or a human? Or does she have anything to do with a foreign god or a local god? Anyway, I've always liked assassin. Gudazzi had a baffled look on his face. However, Gudazzi's words stunned the innocent Matthew. His face couldn't help but blush. That. Senior, are you confessing to Senior Villo? Matthew asked embarrassedly. Wuming was also stunned. He felt that Gudazzi's love for him was not the kind of love between a man and a woman. It was more like the love between a brother and a sister. It's not a confession. If I have to say it, I feel that assassin is like a brother to me. Simply put, it's the love between a brother and a sister. Gudazzi also explained in a serious tone. Sure enough, Tachika, you think so too. Wuming sighed in relief. If he treated Gudazzi as a sister, and Gudazzi treated him as a love interest, wouldn't it be strange? Of course. Anyway, I don't know why, but I always feel close to assassin. This was the same for Wuming. Although the two had only met a few times, ever since Wuming met Gudazzi for the first time, he felt that Gudazzi was like a sister to him. He wanted to take care of her. Although Wuming didn't understand the reason, it didn't hinder the feelings between Wuming and Gudazzi. Gudazzi said with a smile. Then, she threw herself into Wuming's arms. The space in this passage isn't that big. Why are you making a fuss? Can't you be more obedient? Wuming's face was full of helplessness. Gudazzi responded to Wuming with a proud laugh. I won't. Seeing this scene, Matthew said with a blank face. Doctor, I'm a bit confused. As a follower and junior who accompanied Gudazzi all the way, Matthew could be said to be the one who understood Gudazzi the most. Senior Varen and Senior Varen aren't siblings, and their feelings for each other are beyond the brotherly love I've seen, but the way they look at each other doesn't seem to be the love between a man and a woman. I don't quite understand this kind of feeling, however. The doctor didn't respond. Doctor? Chaldea had to speak through Gudazzi's bracelet, but Chaldea didn't need to be close to receive the sound. It was precisely because of this that Gudazzi also realized that something was wrong. After leaving Wuming's arms, Gudazzi called Chaldea. Doctor? Doctor? However, there was still no response. Is the signal interfered again? Gudazzi couldn't help but guess. After all, the signal between the bracelet and Chaldea was often easily interfered with. This was also a drawback that Chaldea couldn't eliminate. It shouldn't be. Although my cave does have a barrier, it can't be interfered with before I get close. Wuming also made a judgment. However, at this moment, Gudazzi's bracelet finally made a sound, but it was Leonardo da Vinci's bracelet. Yes, this is your genius Leonardo da Vinci's bracelet. Student Romani has died in battle, and he was muttering, it's more than brotherly love, but it's not love between a man and a woman. I don't understand such feelings. Damn it, I'm such a loser without family, friends, and lovers. Oh, by the way, Romani was crying. As a genius, Leonardo da Vinci could imitate him, but for the sake of this genius image, I refused. So the doctor is such a loser. Gudazzi couldn't help but laugh dryly. I thought the doctor was married. Matthew, who had seen Roman wearing a ring, didn't know what to say. Roman, I won't talk about you for now, but Tachika, Matthew, Leonardo da Vinci, and the other surviving members of Chaldea, aren't they all your friends and family? You've been through life and death together, and you've been working hard to save the world. This is a situation where one wrong move will cause you to lose the whole game. Isn't that enough to prove this relationship? Although the saying, "a friend in need is a friend indeed," seemed a little cliché, the meaning it expressed was not a cliché. No matter when, a friend in need could indeed reveal a friend in need, and Chaldea was currently doing so. After Wooming said this, Gadotsi, Matthew, and the rest of Chaldea fell into silence. Chapter 937. What's wrong? Wooming saw that everyone was silent, and for a moment, he was puzzled. Did he say something wrong? Villo-senpai, you're right. Matthew showed a relieved smile. That's right, everyone worked together to get through so many singularities. Without everyone, Matthew and I definitely wouldn't be able to do it, Gadotsi also said. It seems that even a genius like me can be slow. It seemed that Wooming was better than Leonardo da Vinci in some aspect, and Leonardo da Vinci's voice sounded quite distressed. And Chaldea's staff also started to discuss because of this sentence. Yes, because I've been nervous all this time, I've forgotten that we're partners who have gone through so many difficulties together. Indeed, although we're facing a world crisis, the relationship between everyone has become more intimate. That's right, to be able to go through the end of the world with everyone, whether we succeed or not, we've already become friends. What nonsense are you talking about? We'll definitely succeed. That's right, Fujimaru and Gillett have gone through so many singularities, we'll definitely succeed. But we can't slack off, only by doing our job can we be worthy of Fujimaru and Gillett's efforts. Oh. Everyone exchanged words one after another, and although they were chatting happily, the staff still didn't forget their work at hand, and even their morale rose for some reason. For a time, Chaldea's control room was still operating normally, but no matter how one looked at it, it was livelier, more lively, and more hopeful than before. And Roman, who was squatting and crying on the side, also recovered and walked to Leonardo da Vinci's side. At this time, Leonardo da Vinci also took the initiative to let Roman sit down. After adjusting his mentality, Roman spoke. Oh, I can only say that you're worthy of being a historical hero and Lord God. You're more open-minded than us humans. Because of the impact of the burning of humanity, our nerves are indeed a little tense in the end. Roman let out a long sigh and thanked Wooming sincerely. Thank you. Whether it was Leonardo da Vinci, Gadotsi, or Matthew, all of them could tell that Roman was very grateful to Wooming. Although it's not as serious as you make it out to be, you guys have indeed neglected it. Of course, Roman, if I had met you earlier, I think we would have definitely become friends. If that was the case, it would be hard to say if the current Roman would really have a fever. Whether or not Wooming could change the past Roman was another matter altogether. I think you can probably change me. For some reason, Roman seemed to be recalling something and fell into deep thought. Forget it, let's talk about these things later. We have to hurry up and catch up with Gil. Don't let him wait too long. Even if he's not called a wise king, the king's temper is also erratic. Wooming's words surprised Gadotsi and Matthew. That's true. Matthew nodded. Yes, let's go quickly, I don't want to experience any more tests. It seems that Gadotsi's memory of the trial given by Gilgamesh was still fresh in her mind. Even if Gadotsi's view of the current Gilgamesh had changed, there was still a fear of Gilgamesh in her heart. Sure enough, when Gadotsi, Wooming, and Matthew caught up with Gilgamesh, Gadotsi's throat moved, and a nervous look appeared on her face. Gilgamesh, who was standing steadily in the middle of the passage with his back facing Wooming's trio, crossed his arms in front of his chest, and only spoke when he heard the movements of Wooming's trio. Idiot! Too slow. This king is still waiting for you. I'm sorry, King Gilgamesh." Gudatsi and Matthew were obviously frightened, but Wooming seemed to have seen through something, and a teasing smile appeared on his face. "Ahem. Gil, if I remember correctly, there should be a fork in the road ahead." Although it was a very normal sentence, Wooming's tone gave people the feeling that he was teasing Gilgamesh. However, the response to Wooming was Gilgamesh's arrogant voice. "Humph. You don't have to deliberately provoke this king. Even if this king will work himself to death, he will not be senile. It's just that our destination this time is not the cave where you are hiding, but another place. This king is afraid that you will take Fumaru and the others the wrong way, so he specially waited for you here." Yes, this road was not a one-way road, there would be many forks in the road ahead. The extra roads were deliberately made by Wooming. In short, in order to make the right way to the cave where he was hiding not easily discovered, it was specially made under the Divine Tower, but it was useless. How could people who had the ability to find the stone door and come in be confused by these forks? If they could come in, if they were instructed by Wooming, they would naturally not go the wrong way, and if they came in with their own ability, it meant that the other party was a capable person, and naturally they would not go the wrong way. Not to mention those who couldn't come in, these forks had no effect on them since they couldn't even come in. As for those who came in by mistake, no one would come in by mistake. Wooming would not make such a typical mistake. The stone door itself was set by Wooming to disperse the loon. Ordinary people couldn't even get close to it, let alone open the mechanism to enter the passage by chance. Therefore, these forks became superfluous. When these forks were made, the young Gilgamesh also persuaded Wooming not to do these useless things, but according to Wooming's words, there must be forks in the tunnel, and other people's secret passages are like this. In the end, Gilgamesh couldn't resist Wooming, so he let Wooming complete the passage mixed with forks. As a result, this place was like a maze. Regardless of whether he got lost or not, he was definitely annoyed. Wooming didn't expect Gilgamesh to forget the way. After all, Gilgamesh must have been here in the past 3 months. Just like Gilgamesh said, he wouldn't forget the way even if he worked himself to death. Wooming teased Gilgamesh mainly to liven up the atmosphere so that Gudatsi and Matthew wouldn't be so nervous. After this king's Uruk was attacked by the magical beasts last time, this king accidentally discovered an extra passage that you set up underground. So, this king took advantage of the situation and dug a new space at the end of this passage to meet the requirements of this king's military advisor. Chapter 938. Gilgamesh said as he walked. Gilgamesh walked in front, illuminated by the light emitted by the dragon horn headdress on Wooming's head. His long shadow spread out on the special stone floor in front of him, creating a clear shadow. In fact, Gilgamesh could see clearly in the dark passage even if there was no light, and so could Wooming, so there was no light in this passage. Today, because Gudatsi and Matthew followed, Wooming asked Kalas to light up the passage. He had to say that Kalas was really omnipotent in terms of support. Wooming didn't know whether Matthew could see clearly, but Wooming knew that Gudatsi, as an ordinary person, needed light. Without delay, Wooming followed Gilgamesh, and then asked Gilgamesh. "Speaking of which, your military counselor is a pseudo-follower. Is his personality Zhuge Kong Ming, or the physical personality? Or is it like Ishtar's 3:7? Taking this opportunity, he could ask Gilgamesh the truth, and Gudatsi and Matthew were also quite interested in this. "Oh, it seems that you have seen this king's military counselor before. We met him in Winter Wood and Rome, but at that time, one was Zhuge Kong Ming, and the other was the physical personality Ermero II. Without Wooming, Gudatsi and Matthew met Ermero II, who acted as a king's military counselor, when they followed the 5th emperor of Rome, Nero, to fight against the enemy. This king's military counselor is Zhuge Kong Ming, not the physical personality Ermero II you have seen." After Gilgamesh finished answering, Wooming spoke again. So what does this Zhuge Kongming need? Is it an independent secret space? Then the cave I used to hide in is not impossible. Why spend the effort to build another one? Wu Ming was quite puzzled. He needs an enclosed space where no one can disturb him to make his props, and your cave has a ventilation, so this king created such a space for him. Probably because he died in a tent with airflow when he was alive, Zhuge Kongming, who became a heroic spirit, was quite concerned about the enclosed space without airflow, especially the kind of enclosed space underground, which made Zhuge Kongming quite satisfied. Furthermore, the cave you once hid in belongs to you. This king will forever guard it for you. This king will not allow anyone to use it. This point is off the table. On this point, Gilgamesh still has his own insistence. Wu Ming naturally knew what Gilgamesh cared about. For Gilgamesh, the place where Wu Ming lived probably has a special meaning to Gilgamesh. Speaking of which, what's at the end of this path? It's just a dead end, there's nothing. Because of this, Gilgamesh built a new secret room at the end of this path. Is your memory getting bad because of your age? How can you forget something you did? Gilgamesh couldn't help but criticize Wu Ming. There's nothing I can do about it. I was just playing with it back then. Wu Ming turned his head to the side awkwardly. Speaking of which, what's at the end of the other paths? Are they also dead ends? Gudatsi was suddenly curious. They're all dead ends. Gilgamesh very simply and crudely replied. Indeed, Gil is right, they're all dead ends, however, Wu Ming added in his heart as if he was complaining. It was indeed a dead end. Other than the dead ends of the other paths, there were all kinds of runes, such as cursed flames, thunderbolts, and so on. Furthermore, they were all so dangerous that one would die if they were not careful. Basically, it was the kind of dead end that made it impossible to survive. Looking at Gudatsi's sudden realization, Wu Ming was sure that the dead end imagined by Gudatsi and the dead end mentioned by Gilgamesh were definitely not the same thing. Castor needs a magic workshop to make items. Mr. Kongming probably needs to build his own workshop, so he asked King Gilgamesh to help him build it. Matthew suddenly interjected. Exactly. Gilgamesh praised Matthew, which made Matthew a little proud. However, Wu Ming was not like Matthew, who didn't know anything. Although Castor needs a magic workshop, the magic cast by Chinese heroes should be fundamentally different from the magic cast by other regions. Even if there is no workshop, Chinese servants can still exert their power. Although Wu Ming didn't know the meaning, Wu Ming knew that the Chinese caster was not like the magicians in other regions. Not only the method and name were different, but the essence was also different from the magic base used by other magicians. In other words, Chinese magicians didn't use magic base. Not to mention the Kanagi magicians for the time being, the magicians after the Kanagi magicians needed magic base to use magic. Although it seemed that magicians could easily perform magic by chanting a spell or drawing a circle, but magicians could only perform magic by connecting to the magic base of this world. The magic base could be imagined as a collection of a series of knowledge, ideas, and so on, and it basically existed in the land. Of course, if you think about Christianity, a world-famous religion, its magic base might be spread all over the world. Just like the Lune Rune, there was also a magic base when it was used. When Wu Ming learned the Lune Rune, he was a Kanagi, and Wu Ming was a mutant, so the magic base naturally couldn't restrict him, so Wu Ming only knew a little about it and didn't go too deep. The magic circuit was not only used to provide magical power, but it was also used to connect to the magic base. This was the most basic truth in the magic world, and basically, every magician would know it. However, Wu Ming, who glanced at Gudatsi, silently took back his sentence at this moment. He had to say that Gudatsi was really too bad as a magician, and in terms of temperament, Gudatsi was not suitable to be a magician at all. However, it was exactly because of Gudatsi's temperament that he could keep making connections with the clones of the heroic spirits who had unique personalities and unusual tempers, the servants. In short, although Wuming didn't have a deep understanding of these, Wuming knew that the magic used by the Chinese magicians was very different from the magic used in other places, so Wuming pointed out that Zhuge Kongming didn't need a magic workshop. Moreover, as the military advisor on the battlefield, Zhuge Kongming must have spent most of his time marching and fighting. Since that's the case, it's not surprising that he has a way to replace the workshop. Now that the magical beasts are wreaking havoc, I don't think that the military advisor needs a special workshop to make items. Wuming's eyes flashed with the light of speculation, although he looked at Gilgamesh. I'm afraid, Gil, you gave him some task. Chapter 939. What task was given? Looking at each other, Gudatsi and Matthew couldn't help but repeat. As expected of this king's teacher, Uruk Yunryong, that's right. As you said, this king's military counselor doesn't need a special workshop. The reason why the military counselor needs a workshop is indeed because this king gave Zhuge Kongming a difficult task. Gilgamesh stopped abruptly as he finished speaking. We're here. So fast? Matthew showed a look of disbelief. They just walked for a short while, how did they arrive? With such a short distance, if they were on the ground, it was almost the market near the Holy Tower in Uruk City. No, Matthew, since you stepped into this fork, your speed has increased several times, but you didn't notice it. Roman saw it clearly through the instrument in Chaldea. The figures of Gudatsi and the others seemed to be moving forward at a high speed. It can be said that they were completely out of Uruk City. According to the instrument, your current position is somewhere near the north wall. Roman shouted in disbelief. How is that possible? We only walked a few steps? Gudatsi was also surprised. Is the instrument broken? What's going on? Ah, so annoying. Roman checked the instrument. But, King Gilgamesh also said that we have arrived, maybe we are really near the north wall. Matthew raised his small hand and expressed his opinion. So that's how it is. Roman stopped checking the equipment and nodded. I think it's probably some kind of magic trick with special effects set up in this underground passage. Since this was Kanzaki's underground labyrinth-like tunnel, the entire tunnel was filled with mana. That was why Roman didn't pay much attention to this mana. Now that he thought about it, it was highly likely that the mana was being emitted by some sort of special magic spell. At the very least, it was related. Roman's judgment is correct. This passage has an acceleration effect. Wuming gave the final answer. However, this was not set by Wuming, it was probably added by Gilgamesh later. Of course, don't forget that this king is now a magician. It's natural for him to use magic to make the passage more convenient. This place was quite a distance away from Uruk. If they were to rely on walking, they would not be able to reach their destination in a short period of time. Only by applying the acceleration effect to the entire passage could they reach their destination in such a short period of time. It only takes such a short time to go from Uruk to the north wall. This is a great advantage for the north wall. Matthew realized the problem. In a sense, this passage shortened the distance between the north wall and Uruk to the extreme. In this way, whether it was support, marching, retreating, or other things, it could be done easily. This passage originally led to the north, and its end was near the north wall. In the beginning, when Mu Xiu and Hu Xiu, one of the commanders of the demonic beasts, led the demonic beasts to sneak into the Uruk from underground, they also found this passage by accident and smoothly arrived near the Uruk. If not for this, the demonic beasts wouldn't have reached the Uruk that night. However, there were two sides to everything. Since the demonic beasts could use this passage to reach the Uruk, why couldn't humans use it? Gilgamesh simply transformed the end of the passage into Zhuge Kongming's magic workshop, which was connected to the barracks in the north wall. If there were no limitations, it would indeed be more convenient to support the north wall from Uruk. The limitation was the narrowness of the passage. Collis, analyze it. Wuming put his hand on the wall and passed the magic to Collis to achieve the effect of sampling. Master, the space here is too narrow. The magic attached to it can only work on a dozen people at most. If more people are added, I'm afraid it will exceed the capacity of the acceleration magic, and the acceleration will be scrapped. Collis' cold voice came from Wuming's head. It could be said that it scared Godotzi and Matthew. Senior Villow's horn. Matthew was stunned. Talk. Godotzi raised her finger and pointed at Wuming's head in surprise. By the way, Collis didn't talk to you, but you have seen Collis before. Wuming's words made Godotzi fall into deep thought. Have we seen her before? In addition to this peculiarity, Godotzi couldn't remember when Wuming had a horn on his head. When we first met, the black hat I was wearing was actually another form of Collis. After hearing Wuming's words, Godotzi suddenly recalled the first time she and Wuming met. That memory was still fresh in Godotzi's mind. So it's that black hat? Godotzi suddenly shouted, as if she had just woken up from a dream. Senpai, you are too rude. Mashu was a little embarrassed as she poked Godotzi. Godotzi, who realized that she was indeed a little rude, scratched the back of her head. Hey, I'm sorry. However, Collis didn't pay attention to Godotzi and Matthew at all. It was precisely because Collis didn't talk to anyone other than Wuming that Godotzi and Matthew didn't remember Collis. Oh, it turned out to be a high-level magic costume. When did you get this? This king doesn't have any impression of it. Gilgamesh saw the nature of Collis at a glance. When he saw the dragon horn on Wuming's head, Gilgamesh knew that it was a magic costume, but Gilgamesh didn't expect Wuming's magic costume to be so intelligent. It was definitely a high-level magic costume. Collis was made by the second magician in the future. Although it is a simple auxiliary magic costume, Collis is almost omnipotent except for combat. What? The second magician made it? This time it was Roman's turn to be surprised. Sure enough, Roman should have thought of this earlier. An attire that was similar to an artificial intelligence and could instantly analyze the magic within the passage was undoubtedly the highest level of magic attire. Perhaps only an existence at the level of a mage would be able to create something like this. However, before Roman could recover from his shock, a voice that was supposed to be very pleasant to the ear emitted a strong fighting spirit at this moment. Oh, I seem to have heard someone mention omnipotence. Chapter 940. It's Leonardo da Vinci's voice. However, Matthew's words were full of worry. After all, although Leonardo da Vinci's voice was still pleasant to the ears, when Leonardo da Vinci's voice entered Matthew's ears, Matthew had a bad feeling. It's probably Leonardo da Vinci's jealousy again. It's not the first time. Godotzi whispered to Matthew. After spending so many days together from Winterwood to Mesopotamia, Godotzi understood Leonardo da Vinci. Whenever other people involved Leonardo da Vinci's expertise, Leonardo da Vinci would become unusually unique. For example, Wuming's omnipotence just now. For Leonardo da Vinci, who had the title of omnipotent, this could be said to be a blatant provocation, and it was a top-notch provocation. Leonardo da Vinci was talented in painting, music, sculpting, mathematics, astronomy, geometry, biology, physics, engineering, invention of props, creation of weapons, and many other fields. Furthermore, he had outstanding achievements in all of them. Furthermore, such an omnipotent person had quite a bit of talent in magic as well. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of counterfeiting, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real product. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of art, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real artist. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of invention and construction, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real inventor. Although it seemed like he was going to use violence, Leonardo da Vinci was against violence. However, if he accidentally used violence, Leonardo da Vinci would not reflect on it. Wu Ming's words just now included all these aspects, which could be said to be an unprecedented provocation for Leonardo da Vinci. Omnipotence. This word could be said to be synonymous with Leonardo da Vinci. Not only Leonardo da Vinci himself, but also many scholars, and followers who knew Leonardo da Vinci in history recognized him. The personnel of Chaldea often sighed with emotion about Leonardo da Vinci's omnipotence. Saying that other existences were omnipotents in front of such a person, wasn't that a provocation to Leonardo da Vinci? Although Wu Ming didn't mean it, the speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. It could only be said that this really confirmed Leonardo da Vinci's word. Be careful of artist followers, because artist followers were often some lunatics. Leonardo da Vinci? Calm down, please. The magic you emit has already affected the safety of the individual of our opposing incense has been completely detected. Communication is also interfered with. Please restrain yourself. Indeed, Wu Ming's side did start to become noisy when he heard Chaldea's words. Leonardo da Vinci's kiss seems to be serious. It's over. I hope the doctor can stop Leonardo da Vinci from kissing. Matthew and Gadazzi began to pray meaninglessly. Wu Ming couldn't help but feel nervous at this moment. It was reasonable to say that he didn't have to be afraid of Leonardo da Vinci at all, but strangely, at this moment, Wu Ming didn't know why he felt a trace of fear. This was probably the uniqueness of artist followers, to be able to make Wu Ming feel afraid. However, in the next second, the sound of something breaking suddenly came from Gadazzi's bracelet. Beep! That was the sound of the communication being cut off. The communication was cut off? Gadazzi and Matthew were curious. It shouldn't be that weak, right? Could it be that Roman did something? However, Wu Ming looked at Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh's claw-gloved hand was still pointing at Gadazzi's direction. There was a trace of magic on the tip of the claw-glove's index finger. Apparently, Gilgamesh helped to cut off the communication between Chaldea and this side. This king just felt that the genius over at Chaldea's side is a little too noisy, and we are about to enter another magician's workshop. If the other party asks, just use this as an excuse. Most magicians' workshops did have the function of blocking other magic methods. This made Gadazzi and Matthew, who knew Leonardo da Vinci, brighten up when they heard Gilgamesh's words. As expected of King Gilgamesh, who can deal with so many desperate government affairs. Gadazzi thought of Gilgamesh's efficiency in dealing with government affairs not long ago. No matter what, he could easily get things done. As expected of King Gilgamesh? He actually found a solution so easily? Matthew looked at Gilgamesh with admiration. As long as Leonardo da Vinci calmed down and explained the reason with a proper reason, this matter would basically be over. A calm Leonardo da Vinci was a very reliable and approachable follower. You too praise this king to your heart's content, ha ha ha. Probably satisfied that he solved the upcoming disaster in an instant, Gilgamesh laughed heartily. Yes, King Gilgamesh! As if encouraged, Gadazzi and Matthew let out an amazing shout. Then Wu Ming made a little joke. Hyunryong, this king solved this problem for you. You should thank this king. Gilgamesh looked at Wu Ming happily. However, how could Wu Ming let Gilgamesh succeed? This is underground, I don't dare to shout. What if it collapses? This scared Gadazzi and Matthew, and they immediately shut their mouths. However, Gilgamesh still had a way to crack Wu Ming's trick. Humph! This place has been magically processed. How can it collapse because of a mere shout? It's simply an alarmist. Immediately afterward, Gilgamesh looked at Wu Ming, or rather, he glared at Wu Ming. What's more, this is a shout of praise for this king. How can it stop? Stupid! As if he was dissatisfied with Wu Ming for causing Gadazzi and Matthew's voices to disappear, he burst out swearing. Yes, yes, my king, but shouldn't we get down to business? Wuming smiled helplessly at Gilgamesh. What are they here for? Your remonstrance is reasonable. This king won't fuss over your mistake. Let's go. This strategist's workshop is just a turn ahead. Gilgamesh said as he led the way. Really? Wuming shook his head helplessly, then followed Gilgamesh. At this moment Wu Ming missed the past. Chapter 941. In the past, Gilgamesh often quarreled with Wu Ming like this. However, every time Enkidu acted as the middleman, Gilgamesh and Wu Ming would be fine in an instant. From an outsider's point of view, they might think that Wu Ming and Gilgamesh were quarreling. However, the two of them only looked fierce on the surface. In fact, they didn't seem to be quarreling at all. After growing up, Gilgamesh would call everyone bastard whenever he saw them. Although he wouldn't call Enkidu and Wu Ming that way, sometimes Gilgamesh's temper was so bad that even Wu Ming couldn't bear it. Enkidu would definitely persuade Gilgamesh with reason and emotion in a gentle manner, but Wu Ming would definitely not be so gentle. As a result, there was the seemingly quarrelsome conversation just now. Over time, it became a way of saying things between the two of them. It could also be considered as a way to vent their feelings. Therefore, from the outside, Wu Ming and Gilgamesh, who seemed to be quarreling, were actually just having a normal conversation. Gilgamesh was clearly not angry. He was just indulging his feelings in front of his friends, family, and teacher, which led to the appearance of quarreling. Losing his temper to outsiders was out of anger, but losing his temper to his family was simply because the other party was his family. Moreover, it wasn't called losing his temper. In short, there was no need to have any concerns because to Gilgamesh, Wu Ming was his family. Although as a king, he didn't need to care about other people's feelings and could do whatever he wanted as a tyrant, there was even less of a need to hide it when facing his family. Especially after sitting on the throne of the Sage King and becoming the true king of people, Gilgamesh hadn't experienced something like this for a long time. After all, compared to himself when he was young, as the Sage King, Gilgamesh's words would not be refuted at all, because the Sage King's words were very correct. Compared to when Gilgamesh was young, there were still a few arrogant guys who kept remonstrating him. Now, in the Uruk imperial court, there were no unnecessary voices. After all, the Sage King's words were right. Naturally, no one would ask for a rebuke. However, no matter what time it was, Gilgamesh always lacked a family member who could bicker with him, a family member who could objectively communicate with him regardless of whether he was right or wrong. Enkidu's personality was too gentle, so it was impossible. Only Wu Ming could fulfill this role. He was not only Gilgamesh's teacher, but also an existence similar to his adoptive father. Moreover, his thinking was quite avant-garde. More importantly, Gilgamesh couldn't defeat or subdue him. Gilgamesh couldn't fight with Wu Ming by risking his life and perishing together. Over time, this became the way Wu Ming and Gilgamesh talked to each other. Unfortunately, they still had business to attend to at the moment. Otherwise, Wu Ming wouldn't have minded talking to Gilgamesh for a while. Anyway, Enkidu was in the form of part of Wu Ming's spiritual base, and when Enkidu appeared, Gilgamesh would definitely be shocked to the extent that his face would change color. At the thought of this, Wu Ming's face showed a wicked smile. However, Wu Ming also thought of one of the demonic beast's commanders, the person who pretended to be Enkidu. This was also a world that he had to deal with personally. However, it was better to deal with the matter at hand first. When everyone turned the corner, they saw a door with a special formation engraved on it. The door completely blocked the road in front of them without any gap. It looked like it grew naturally here. When Wu Ming saw this stone door, he felt an unknown magic power enveloping him. "Senior, do you feel it?" Matthew and Gudatsi whispered. "Yes, I feel it." Gudatsi nodded. We've probably entered the range of the other party's noble artifact. Wuming wanted to take a step forward, facing the magic power emitted by the door in front of him, and walked to the front of the door. It was a circle formed by 2 large black and white fish intertwined with each other. There were 8 patterns that were very similar but had obvious differences in details. This was the formation engraved on the door. 8 trigrams. This is probably Zhuge Kongming's best formation, Stone Soldier 8 formation. Back at the Winterwood Singularity, Zhuge Kongming wanted to use the Stone Soldier 8 formation on Attila the Hun in an attempt to delay the other party and give Gudatsi and the others a chance to escape. However, Zhuge Kongming's Stone Soldier 8 formation had just been used, and it was countered by Sima Yi's mixed elements array that was specially designed to deal with Zhuge Kongming. Wuming finally witnessed the power of the Stone Soldier 8 formation here today. Colossus. At Wuming's command, the glowing dragon horn on Wuming's head, which was Colossus, suddenly expanded the light, and then immediately weakened. The light released by Colossus was used for scanning, and the light that expanded just now was like radiation, instantly scanning the surrounding area with this place as the center. Master, everything underground within the largest range that I can scan is covered by an invisible magic power. Due to the uniqueness of the other party's noble artifact, if you're not close to here, you won't be able to sense the existence of this special magic power at all. Probably due to the uniqueness of the other party's noble artifact, although the range of the magic power was extremely wide, if one was not close to the source, one would not be able to sense it at all. Moreover, the entire underground area that was beyond Colossus's scanning range was covered. This is Zhuge Kongming's countermeasure to prevent the Uruk from being attacked by monsters from underground again. Wuming looked at Gilgamesh as he spoke. However, Gilgamesh did not answer Wuming directly. This king was having a headache about how to prevent the next underground attack from monsters. This king's military advisor has done this king a huge favor. Since there was a first time, there would definitely be a second time. Gilgamesh would not expect monsters to be like humans, who would give up after failing the first time. The safety of the Uruk could not be taken lightly by gambling. Coincidentally, Zhuge Kongming's noble artifact could prevent the enemy from invading. It could be used as the underground defense that gave Gilgamesh a headache. However, there was a price to pay. In order to cover the entire underground area, the expanded range of the Stone Soldier 8 formation could only be used underground, and the parts above ground could not be taken care of at all. Even so, almost the entire underground area that extended from the north wall to the Uruk was locked by Zhuge Kongming's noble artifact. Once monsters sneaked into the range of the Stone Soldier 8 formation from underground, they would immediately lose their direction and eventually return to the starting point. It was impossible for them to dig deeper and sneak into the Uruk to attack, because if they were to dig deeper, they would dig into Ereshkigal's mansion of the dead. Chapter 942. After paying the price of causing many monsters to die in the underworld, the monster commanders gave up on the idea of attacking the Uruk from underground. They had no choice. When the monster commanders tried to dig deeper into the ground where the 8 stone formations could not cover, they would reach the underworld if they dug a little deeper. There was no way around it. Although Ereshkigal's return did not bring the underworld from the entire Mesopotamia region, and some places could still be dug very deep, the idea of digging from the bottom to bypass the 8 stone formations was really unrealistic. After all, it was too deep, and it would take a lot of time and effort. Therefore, avoiding the underworld and bypassing the 8 stone formations from underground was really difficult for the monsters. Therefore, the monster commanders no longer tried to bypass the Uruk from underground. Setting up Zhuge Kongming's workshop underground and letting Zhuge Kongming use the noble phantasm was actually a defensive measure set up by Gilgamesh for the underground. This was a blatant scheme. With the noble phantasm covering the underground, the monsters could only go around or give up on attacking the Uruk from underground. However, the efficiency of going around the Uruk was too low. It was better to attack the Uruk directly from the north. At the very least, they could wait for the monsters to increase in numbers and let them attack from all directions. No matter how hard it was more practical than going around the Uruk from underground. Therefore, the monster commanders changed their minds and prepared to attack the Uruk from all directions. Wuming's first encounter with Ulidim was the vanguard. He went around the mountains to the back of the Uruk and waited for the opportunity to attack the Quetzalcoatl together with the monsters from the north, the mountains in the northeast, and the Persian Gulf in the southeast to take down the Uruk from all directions. At the same time, they could also get rid of the Quetzalcoatl on the surface. At that time, they only needed to focus on the goddess of the underworld. Wuming felt that the monster commanders were a little whimsical, or perhaps they thought too simply of humans and the Quetzalcoatl. The power of the feathered god had been mentioned before. Furthermore, it took a lot of effort for magical beasts to traverse mountains. Only magical beast commanders with unique physiques and abilities superior to mass-produced magical beasts would be able to traverse mountains effortlessly. However, with the command of the demonic beast commander, it wasn't impossible to mass-produce demonic beasts. But if that was the case, the number of demonic beasts would need to be terrifyingly large. Otherwise, how could they attack from all directions? It could only be said that the idea was good, but it was unrealistic. After all, there weren't that many magical beasts. He could only wait. There was no other way. After all, magical beasts also needed to be born. But now, even if there were enough magical beasts, perhaps the magical beast commander's plan to attack the Uruk from all directions couldn't be carried out. After all, whether it was the mass-produced Ulidim, Ujir, or Musamafu, more than half of the demonic beasts had been killed or injured. It was also because of the huge decrease in the number of demonic beasts that the demonic beast commanders in charge of attacking the North Wall had restrained themselves. The frequency of attacks and the number of demonic beasts had decreased, which was why Gilgamesh was able to find time to come here with Wuming, Gudatsi, and Matthew. And not only that, but the number of demonic beast commanders had also decreased from the original 7 to 5. The unknown person who had stolen Enkidu's body, the venomous dragon Basumu, the three-horned lion dragon Ujir, the seven-headed snake Musamafu, and the winged mermaid Kururu. One of the demonic beast commanders, Ulidim, wanted to devour Wuming in the southwest mountain, but was killed by Wuming instead. The other demonic beast commander, Ujir, was also killed by Ereshkigal. Although Musamafu escaped, it was really unpleasant. On the human side, the original 10 servants had been reduced to 11. Although Wuming had drawn Ishtar to his side, she was still the Sumer goddess, the mistress of the sky, Ishtar. Moreover, whether it was Wuming or Gilgamesh, what they valued was not Ishtar herself, but the bull of the sky that Ishtar had, Gugurana. Although it was a mythological beast, Gugurana couldn't be defeated by the number of servants, but by the quality of the servants. The unknown person who had stolen Enkidu's body was let go. After all, the other party was using Enkidu's body, and it would be best to capture him alive. The remaining 4 demonic beast commanders didn't need to worry about anything, and the remaining 4 demonic beast commanders were not small. When the time came to deal with these 4 demonic beast commanders, if Ishtar summoned Gugurana and let some servants cooperate with it, eliminating these 4 demonic beast commanders would not be difficult at all. The only thing that needed to be paid attention to was Basumu's poison. Even Gugurana couldn't ignore Basumu's poison. Both sides were at the same level, but it was hard to guarantee that Gugurana would be poisoned. However, if it was Funbaba, there was probably a chance that it could resist Basumu's poison. As the mythological beast of the forest, Funbaba was equivalent to the incarnation of nature, and it had a purifying effect. Even if it couldn't completely purify Basumu's poison, It should be able to weaken the poison or resist it. When Wuming left last time, he did let Funbaba out of Yggdrasil and released it to this singularity. The purpose was to let Funbaba help to create a wall of vines to protect the north wall and protect humans. As a result, Wuming didn't know where Funbaba went. Its master had returned, but it didn't know how to find its master. By the way, Gilgamesh, do you know where Funbaba went? Wuming suddenly asked Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh frowned. Weren't they talking about the 8 trigrams? Why did they suddenly change the topic? It was impossible for Gilgamesh to know that Wuming was thinking about so many things, but Gilgamesh finally answered Wuming. I don't know. After you left, Funbaba helped the north wall construct a wall of vines, and then disappeared. Although the wall of vines in the north wall has basically been consumed, it is also thanks to Funbaba's help at that time. Otherwise, this king's Uruk wouldn't know what would have happened. Funbaba added a layer of vines before the north wall was completed. Following the vines, the efficiency was much higher. It could be said that without Funbaba's help, the 11 magical beast commanders and a large number of enhanced magical beasts that suddenly appeared 3 months ago would have been enough to break the north wall. I'll go look for it later. After all, Funbaba can also contribute to dealing with the magical beast commanders. However, Wuming's words attracted Roman's attention. Villo, is the Funbaba you're talking about the Funbaba that lives in the fir forest? Wuming wasn't surprised that Roman knew about Funbaba. After all, if he could be passed down as a god, there was no reason why Funbaba couldn't. That's right. What's wrong? If we can really find Funbaba, it can be said to be a great support for us. Chapter 943. According to Sumer's legends, Funbaba, the divine beast of the forest, had unparalleled power. It even imprisoned the mistress of the sky, Ishtar, leaving the gods helpless. In the end, it was Gilgamesh and Enkidu who worked together with some of the gods to subdue it. It was also because Gilgamesh saved Ishtar that he became involved with Ishtar, which led to the subsequent events of the Bull of the Sky incident. Roman stopped there. After all, it was not appropriate for him to explain the subsequent events in front of Gilgamesh. All in all, if we can find Funbaba, it will definitely be as useful as the Bull of the Sky, Gogolana. No, it should be said that Funbaba is indeed stronger than the Bull of the Sky. Is this true, assassin? Is Funbaba really that strong? Gudatsi, who did not understand this, looked at Wuming, trying to get an answer. Probably. Wuming, who was deep in thought, casually replied. It seemed a little perfunctory. It could not be helped. Wuming's Funbaba was not the same as the Funbaba that Roman and the others understood from the legends. Wuming's actions in the parallel world were projected to other parallel worlds by the suppression force. In other parallel worlds, Wuming's legends and historical stories were modified. This was true, but it was limited to Wuming himself. Moreover, the parallel worlds could not completely copy Wuming's actions. There would definitely be changes. For example, the Gilgamesh in the parallel world that Wuming was in was a woman, but the Gilgamesh in this parallel world was a man. In this way, there would definitely be differences between the two sides. Wuming originally thought that the Funbaba in the parallel world would be modified like Wuming's Funbaba. However, when Wuming heard what Roman said, he instantly understood one thing. The Funbaba in this world and his Funbaba experienced different things. According to Roman, Funbaba imprisoned Ishtar. Then, Gilgamesh and Enkidu were asked by the gods to rescue Ishtar, which led to the Bull of the Sky incident. However, Wuming's Funbaba did not imprison Ishtar. Moreover, because Funbaba and Wuming's holy lance Yggdrasil fused, after being retrieved by Wuming, Funbaba basically did not appear in Mesopotamia. The Bull of the Sky incident in Wuming's parallel world was only because Ishtar lost her temper because she thought that she was fooled. Sure enough, Wuming was still relying on Ishtar to descend anyway, Because the Fun Baba was retrieved by Wu Ming, Wu Ming did not know the specific strength of Fun Baba. Therefore, Wu Ming hesitated when answering Gudatsi. In the end, Wu Ming, who did not think that it would affect anything, chose to end the topic. I'll look for Fun Baba later. For now, let's deal with the matter at hand. It was better to wait until they found Fun Baba in the future. By the way, how do we get in? Wu Ming looked at Gilgamesh. This door should not be opened with brute force. There should be some kind of mechanism. Logically speaking, this door should have opened when we stood here. Since it didn't open, it's probably because Zhuge Kongming is busy inside. Gilgamesh was not anxious because Zhuge Kongming neglected him because Gilgamesh knew that Zhuge Kongming's task was difficult. At this moment, as if it had heard Gilgamesh's words, the door in front of everyone split from the middle and slowly opened to both sides, revealing darkness. This was probably the so-called camouflage. King Gilgamesh, please forgive me. A familiar voice came from the darkness, followed by the figure of a young man who seemed to be in his 30s coming out of the darkness. The young man's face was the face of Ermero II that Wu Ming had seen before. Zhuge Kongming did indeed use Ermero II's pseudo-follower. Sure enough, it's Ermero II's pseudo-follower. Gudatsi and Matthew whispered to each other. Yes, senpai, I just don't know who is inside this body. Judging from the other party's first sentence just now, it should be Zhuge Kongming without a doubt. Wu Ming also joined the small circle of the two and whispered to each other. If it was Ermero II, it was impossible to talk to Gilgamesh with words like, please forgive me. After all, Ermero II was a modern man, so it should be Zhuge Kongming who was from the ancient era. It's okay. How is the task given to you by this king? I'm doing the final processing, so I neglected you. Please come in and talk. Zhuge Kongming turned sideways and motioned everyone to go in and talk. Gilgamesh took the lead and went in, followed by Wu Ming. When it was Gudatsi and Matthew's turn, Matthew stopped and asked about Zhuge Kongming. Mr. Kongming, do you remember us? Zhuge Kongming shook his head. I don't remember anymore. It seems that you probably met another me somewhere else. Matthew's expression was a little bad, but Matthew wasn't disappointed with the answer. After all, it couldn't be helped. After all, servants were the avatars of heroic spirits. Along the way, they had met many servants that they had met before. However, some of them knew them, and some of them didn't. The most typical example was Leonidas I, who was currently in the North Wall. When they were in the Roman Singularity, they encountered Leonidas I as an enemy. However, Leonidas I in the Mesopotamia Singularity didn't seem to remember Gudatsi and Matthew. In short, Gudatsi and Matthew were used to it. Let's go in and talk. When the door of the stone formation is open, my noble phantasm will be temporarily ineffective. Although the demonic beasts wouldn't choose to attack from underground, they still had to open the stone formation. What if the demonic beasts used the same trick again? When Matthew and Gudatsi heard this, they both showed a panicked expression, as if they were embarrassed for delaying things. Sorry. Let's go in. After Gudatsi smiled awkwardly, she immediately pulled Matthew, who was also smiling awkwardly, and ran into the dark fog. In this regard, Zhuge Kongming smiled rather indifferently. Although the noble phantasm would indeed be ineffective for a while, there was no need to panic. Shaking his head, Zhuge Kongming then walked into the door, and in the next second, the originally split 8 trigrams slowly closed together. Chapter 944. Zhuge Kongming's workshop wasn't as big as imagined, but upon closer inspection, it wasn't small at all. However, Zhuge Kongming's semicircular workshop was quite attractive. The semicircular magic workshop gave people the feeling that the sky was like a bamboo hat, and the ground was like a plate. It was filled with the aura of ancient China, as if they had come from Mesopotamia to ancient China in an instant. The entire workshop's floor was covered with neat green stones, and the domed ceiling was also decorated. There wasn't a trace of soil in sight. It was simply a neat stone room, and it made people's eyes light up. Zhuge Kongming's workshop didn't have much in it, except for a few huge stones and a stone platform in the middle. The huge stones were arranged in a circular pattern in the middle. Upon closer inspection, there were exactly 8 of them, and they were arranged in the shape of the 8 trigrams. In the middle, there was a platform in black and white. On the platform was a strange machine that looked like a modern cannon-shaped weapon, but it was much larger than modern military cannons. The maximum length of the machine was at least 20 meters. Most importantly, this strange machine was so gorgeous that it didn't look like a weapon at all. It looked more like a precious treasure that had been lost to the world. "What is this?" Gudatsi was shocked. Could this thing that looked like a cannon be some kind of important device? A weapon? Or is this a necessity for Mr. Kongming's workshop? Matthew asked. It was obvious that Gudatsi and Matthew were really interested in this. Taking a closer look at the cannon, the body of the cannon was just a support that could move the barrel up and down. The support supported a long, cannon-like object. The entire cannon barrel could be said to occupy 90% of the entire machine. The current inclination of the barrel was 20 degrees, and it was almost level with the ground. The support under the barrel could be used to adjust the angle of the barrel. Although the support couldn't make the barrel tilt 90 degrees, 67 degrees was not a problem. If it was a weapon, it could be used as a super long-range weapon. At the end of the barrel, there was a round cover that could be opened. The entire barrel gradually became thinner from the back to the front. At the muzzle, there was not a pitch-black hole, but a sharp spike. The spike was as long as 3 meters. It looked like a long spear, and it was quite slender, which made it extremely terrifying. However, when matched with the barrel that was over 20 meters long, the 3-meter muzzle was actually nothing. It was just that the 3-meter-long muzzle was quite terrifying. If it was shorter, it would probably look like the tip of a ballpoint pen or an electric soldering iron. However, no matter how long it was hard to believe that this machine was a long-range weapon. Other things aside, the spikes at the muzzle looked like they were used to stab or ram, but it would be too strange to call it a battering ram. But unfortunately, it was indeed a weapon. Doctor? Gudatsi and Matthew asked Roman, who was in charge of Chaldea and had the knowledge of the database. Ahem, this. Roman's answer was stuttering, and it was obvious that he didn't know. This is the seal of divinity, Dinger. Wuming answered Gudatsi and Matthew on behalf of Roman. Dinger? Gudatsi and Matthew nodded thoughtfully. However, Gudatsi asked his question in a serious manner. By the way, assassin, what is the seal of divinity, Dinger? This time, Gilgamesh answered Gudatsi before Wuming could. It's a weapon used to launch this king's treasure, using the instantaneous magic power as a cannonball. Treasure? Matthew and Gudatsi were a little confused. Could it be that just gold and silver could be used as a cannonball? Would it be weak? The two of them were full of doubts as they had never seen a cannonball being launched. However, it was indeed so. After all, the treasure of this era seemed a little difficult for Gudatsi and Matthew to understand. At that moment, Wuming simply explained to the two of them. To put it simply, it's actually a treasure that can be called a noble phantasm. It's loaded and launched as a cannonball. Noble phantasm? The reason why Wuming said so was because it was easy to understand a noble phantasm. When Wuming said so, Gudatsi and Matthew instantly understood. Both of their eyes were full of disbelief. Did it have to be so extravagant? Not only Gudatsi and Matthew, but Roman was also shocked. Noble phantasm? Is this the so-called collapse of fantasy? It's such a waste. Roman sighed helplessly from Gudatsi's bracelet. Noble phantasm was the crystallization of humans' fantasy. It was not a problem to call it the collapse of fantasy. After hearing what Roman said, Gudatsi and Matthew agreed with Roman, which was rare. I see. It's indeed a very appropriate description. Matthew nodded in agreement. It's rare for the doctor to say something that's right. Roman was a little sad about what Gudatsi said. However, he had been through a lot and gradually got used to it. Using a noble phantasm as a cannonball and launching it to cause an explosion. Theoretically, it could cause a lot of damage, but is it really okay to be so wasteful? Roman was once again worried about Gilgamesh's reckless waste. Human history is a waste of history. If that's the case, this king's phantasm should be used this way. Gilgamesh's courage let Gudatsi and Mashu once again witness Gilgamesh's excellent side. He's indeed the most ancient hero king. Matthew once again praised Gilgamesh in a serious manner. If it were me, I would probably be very reluctant. Gudatsi smiled embarrassedly. Isn't that obvious? The only one who can easily do this is this king, who has all the treasures in this world. Ha ha ha! Gilgamesh laughed happily. This made Wuming shake his head helplessly again. The king would not hesitate to accept the compliments and be happy because it was an affirmation of the king. King Gilgamesh, it's time for you to explain the mission that you've given to Zhuge Kongming. Although that was what Wuming said, Wuming could almost guess it. After all, the divine right seal, Dinger, on the stone platform in front of them was obviously different from the one that Wuming knew. When Wuming saw the divine right seal, Dinger, he understood the mission that Gilgamesh had given to Zhuge Kongming. It was probably to modify the divine right seal, Dinger. It's just as you think, Hyunryong. This king has given the military counselor the task of modifying the divine right seal, Dinger. Chapter 945. King Gilgamesh's Seal of Divine Right, Dinger, is a weapon that uses the magic power generated by the destruction of treasures to cause large-scale damage. Although this weapon has a very obvious effect on killing demonic beasts, its effect on the commander of the demonic beasts is negligible. Zhuge Kongming stepped forward and explained to everyone. Ordinary magical beasts wouldn't be that much stronger even if they were strengthened. However, magical beast commanders were different. Dinger's bombardment couldn't cause the slightest bit of damage to magical beast commanders. The most it could do was burn off some of its fur and scrape off some of its scales. In the face of demons with extremely strong physiques, Gilgamesh entrusted me to modify the Seal of Divine Authority into a weapon that could kill them with a single blow. Therefore, I modified the muzzle of the Seal of Divine Authority into a concentrated cannon. Originally, the Seal of Divine Authority used King Gilgamesh's treasures as bullets and fired them in the form of bullet. Now, it has been converted into a continuous laser radiation. After hitting the target, the energy will spread throughout the target's body and destroy the target's molecular structure. In other words, the Seal of Divine Authority, which was originally an area of effect weapon, had been modified by Zhuge Kongming into a single-target weapon. So that's how it is. It's specially designed to deal with demons. Gudatsi then contacted Roman. Doctor, what do you think? Roman, who was in Chaldea, tapped on the keyboard in front of him. Obviously, he was examining and analyzing the Seal of Divine Authority in front of Gudatsi. The muzzle of the Seal of Divine Authority has indeed been converted into a concentrated cannon. However, because Chaldea does not have any specific data on demons, I have no way of determining whether it will be effective against them. You don't have to do it. This king can determine that the new Seal of Divine Authority will definitely be effective against demons. It seemed that Gilgamesh was full of confidence in the new Seal of Divine Authority. He did not know whether it was because he believed in his own judgment or Zhuge Kongming's technology. King Gilgamesh is sensible. After all, it took me 3 months to modify it. Not only demons, but also servants. As long as the target is hit, the only outcome waiting for them is to retreat. Although Zhuge Kongming's words sounded quite lofty, Wu Ming still found a problem. Military counselor, listening to what you mean, this thing can still miss? Yes. This made Gerdotsi, Mashu, and even Roman from Chaldea break out in cold sweat. It was the first time that they saw a weapon they designed not being able to hit the enemy, but still being able to say yes. However, Wu Ming's question was indeed full of problems, so he simply helped Zhuge Kongming to smooth things over. The situation of missing is bound to happen. After all, the damage has changed from an area of effect to a single point. The demons won't stand there stupidly and let you hit them. They just need to aim and fire a few more times. That's impossible. The modified seal of divine authority will be scrapped after firing once. What? Zhuge Kongming's words completely shocked everyone. Although Gilgamesh did not say anything, he also showed a shocked expression. Obviously, Gilgamesh did not expect that Zhuge Kongming would transform the seal of divine authority into this. Then, in that case, wouldn't the seal of divine authority become a consumable? Although Matthew's words contained uncertainty, everyone present understood that the modified seal of divine authority by Zhuge Kongming was indeed a consumable. Then, Zhuge Kongming's expression was quite calm, and he spoke disapprovingly. The magic converted from the destroyed treasures in the seal of divine authority is unstable. That's why it can be used as a cannonball. I stabilized the cannonball's magic and concentrated it at a single point. Not only that, but I also increased the damage by ignoring the burden on the seal of divine authority. Although the cost is the self-destruction of the seal of divine authority, but overall, the damage caused has been increased to the extreme. Then, Zhuge Kongming changed the topic. Although I'm a caster magician, I'm not good at making items. My ability is more focused on the battlefield. Creating a weapon that can deal extreme damage without causing a burden to the seal of divine authority, Dinger, is slightly beyond my ability. Although Zhuge Kongming belittled himself, the fact that he was able to transform the interior of the seal of divine authority was enough to prove that Zhuge Kongming's ability to make items was not low. After all, the strategist type of caster and the writer type of caster also had drawbacks when making items. But even so, Zhuge Kongming still transformed the Dinger into a satisfactory appearance. In the end, Zhuge Kongming gave a key answer. Moreover, as long as I can hit the monster commander, all the problems will not be a problem, right? Matthew was surprised. Yes, it is indeed as Mr. Kongming said. Although the seal of divine authority can only be used as a one-time consumable, as long as we can hit the monster commander, it will be fine. As long as we can hit the monster commander, we will be able to kill it. Matthew clenched his fists in front of his chest, looking quite cute. However, the expression on everyone's face gave Matthew a look of disapproval. As for the reason, it was very simple, after all. If we use this modified seal of divine authority to attack the monster commander, it will be easy for the monster commander to dodge the attack. Wu Ming sighed. Even if the monster commander is not aware of the danger, this method can only be used once. After all, the other magical beast commanders weren't blind. If they saw that the Dinger's attack could easily kill a magical beast commander, the other magical beast commanders would definitely pay attention to it. It would be even more difficult to hit it the next time. However, I don't think it will succeed once. After all, monster commanders have senses that are many times better than human beings. Their prediction of danger is also very strong. They will definitely be able to dodge it. As the last straw that broke the camel's back, Roman said a statement that cut off everyone's hope. Sure enough, we can only give up. Gudatsi couldn't help but show a disappointed expression. At this time, Zhuge Kongming confidently interrupted everyone. No, if we use a trick, we can actually let the modified divine power seal, Dinger, attack the demon's commander. Chapter 946. That's right. Zhuge Kongming was an outstanding person in terms of intelligence. Although Zhuge Kongming was not as outstanding as his contemporaries, that didn't mean that Zhuge Kongming wasn't good enough. It was just like how peacocks and phoenixes were not outstanding, but peacocks were much more colorful and outstanding than most birds. And judging from the fact that Zhuge Kongming's plan was effective, Zhuge Kongming's plan wasn't that bad. On the contrary, Zhuge Kongming was a completely trustworthy strategist. The reason why Zhuge Kongming designed the Divine Right Seal, Dinger, to be a powerful attack at the cost of self-destruction was probably because he was confident in his plan. Putting aside the demonic beast commander who was using Enkidu's body, there were still 4 demonic beast commanders that had to be eliminated. If the Divine Right Seal, Dinger, was used properly, it would have a 100% chance of hitting the demonic beast commanders. They would definitely be able to eliminate the demonic beast commanders without using Funbaba or Gugalana. Well, let's listen to this king's words then. This king trusts you a lot, Gilgamesh nodded. It seemed that he valued Zhuge Kongming's brains a lot. At that moment, no one said anything more. After all, Gilgamesh had already said it. By the way, strategist Kongming, how many Divine Right Seals, Dinger, have you modified? However, Zhuge Kongming said a number that made everyone's jaws drop. 1. Suddenly, no one said a word. The air seemed to have frozen. It was silent and cold. Wuming, who was the first to react, reached out his hand and slowly covered his ears. What? Gudatsi, Matthew, Roman, and even Leonardo da Vinci, who had been watching from the side, all let out shocking shouts. The sound waves were like shock waves, even causing the illusion that the entire cave was shaking. By the way, Gil, do you know about this? Wuming slowly put down his hands that were covering his ears and couldn't help but ask Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, who was not affected by Gudatsi and the others' sonic attack, nodded. Indeed, this king knows about this. After all, this is the only Dinger that this king gave to military counselor. The others are either in Uruk or in the North Wall. Immediately, everyone revealed a helpless expression. After all this time, it turned out that there was a problem on Gilgamesh's side. No. In fact, even if you give me more Dinger, I can only modify one at the moment. 3 months is already my limit. Although Zhuge Kongming said so, there was no trace of shame on his face. Gudatsi and Matthew were still in a state of shock. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci, who were in Chaldea, also looked powerless. This turn of events was too much for them to bear. I take back my words of praise for Zhuge Kongming. After spending 3 months, he was only able to modify 1 Dinger. There was no one else in the world who could do that. Thinking about how Zhuge Kongming's Stone Warrior 8 formations covered more than half of Mesopotamia, could it be that Zhuge Kongming's skill points were all spent on formation? Cough. Let's organize the information. All in all, we only have 1 Dinger that can be used on a monster commander, right? Apart from Gilgamesh, everyone, including Zhuge Kongming, nodded silently. Wuming could not help but facepalm. Actually, it was not that bad. After all, at most, they had returned to the state before they met Zhuge Kongming. Since there is only 1 Dinger, let's keep it as a ghost card for now. After all, there was only 1 modified Dinger. There was no way to keep it as a consumable item. It might be useful as a ghost card. By the way, Gil, did you bring me here just to show me this? Previously, Gilgamesh had given orders and criticisms to everyone in the tower. Only Gilgamesh had requested to talk to Wuming privately. Although he had brought along Gadotsi and Matthew, it did not prevent Gilgamesh and Wuming from having a private chat. At the same time, Wuming did not think that Gilgamesh had called him for such a small matter. Even if the modified seal of divine right, Dinger, could destroy the demon commander in one strike, Silent Wonder wouldn't think that it was a big deal. After all, there was no need for Silent Wonder to personally see such a thing. All he needed to do was to display its effects on the battlefield. Of course, there is something else. Gilgamesh showed an expression that said, "Hyunryong knows me best." Then, he walked to the corner and knocked on the stone wall. "Come here and feel it with your magic." Wuming walked over and placed his hand on the stone wall. Then, he injected his magic into the wall. In an instant, a magnificent 3D projection appeared in Wuming's mind. This was the scene of the area covered by the stone formation. Everything on the ground could be seen clearly by Wuming. Many soldiers in the north wall were undergoing emergency maintenance as if a war was imminent. Leonidas I was constantly training the soldiers. Carts of supplies were pushed out of a military tent that was much larger than the other military tent. There were also people who could smile even in the face of the monster crisis. What is this? Wuming could not help but look at Gilgamesh, who was beside him. The stone formation is used to monitor the situation on the ground. As a result, there is no way for him to investigate the situation on the ground. However, if there is someone with magic with the help of the stone formation, they can detect everything on the ground and underground. It is like a god's perspective. However, Wuming was still puzzled. What did this have to do with him? Wouldn't it be better to just find someone with magic? The reason why I called you over is because I received a mud tablet from the front line. It says that many magical beasts seem to be gathering in Nippur. Just by looking at their numbers, it seems like they are preparing for an unprecedented attack by magical beasts. After hearing Gilgamesh's words, Wuming subconsciously turned his attention to the place outside the north wall. If there is someone with more powerful magic, they will be able to see further places. Even this king is unable to observe the nearest city. At present, I am afraid that only you, Hyunryong, can do it. Therefore, the reason why Wuming was called over was to investigate the truth of the information sent from the front line. After all, the Monster Wave also had a Monster Wave commander. It was very likely that the Monster Wave had confused the humans. Therefore, they had to investigate. As Gilgamesh said, Wuming's magic was indeed the highest on their side. Even Ishtar's magic was not comparable to Wuming's. Just as Gilgamesh had said, the area covered by the stone soldier formation was only a small part of the northern wall. It was far from the extent of scouting the nearby cities. However, it was probably as Gilgamesh had said. Due to the large amount of mana, Silent Cry was able to see a few kilometers away from the northern wall. Chapter 947. Although he only caught a glimpse of it for a moment, the scene of magical beasts gathering and demons dancing was deeply imprinted in Wuming's mind. It was a city that had long been turned into ruins, and there were a large number of magical beasts of various shapes and sizes gathered there. The liger-type magical beasts roared at the sky, while the snake-type magical beasts breathed out on the ground. It was comparable to a group of demons dancing and 100 ghosts walking at night. The number of magical beasts shocked Wuming. There were at least tens of thousands of magical beasts. It was hard to imagine that so many magical beasts could gather in such a city. And from the glimpse just now, Wuming also saw that many magical beasts were still gathering there. It really looked like they were preparing for a big battle. Your information is correct, Gil. I saw a large number of magical beasts gathering in the ruins of Nippur. There are more than 10,000 magical beasts, and it's still increasing. Wuming could not help but frown. Oh, so it's like this. Gilgamesh frowned with his arms crossed in front of his chest. The magical beasts were really preparing for a big general attack. Kalas, can you project the scene I just saw from my mind? However, Kalas did not answer whether she could or could not. Instead, she began to execute Wuming's order. Yes, master. The dragon horn on Wuming's head fired a ray of magic at the wall. In an instant, a projected image appeared on the wall. It was the scene that Wuming had caught a glimpse of before. Wow! It's really a projection? Gudatsi shouted in surprise and trotted to Wuming's side. Sure enough, Miss Kalas is very powerful. Matthew was amazed. Although he did not run like Gudatsi, he still walked over. Extracting the scene from Wuming's mind in an instant and projecting it, this once again proved that Kalas was an advanced magic dress. Sure enough, Kalas is a very advanced magic dress. If it was Leonardo da Vinci, it would not be possible to make it. Roman could not help but praise. However, for some reason, Roman's voice stopped abruptly as if fate had grasped his throat. I see, such an ability, it is indeed the work of the gem master. At this time, Leonardo da Vinci's voice came from Gudatsi's bracelet. Leonardo da Vinci's kiss? Gudatsi instantly felt that something was wrong. Not only Gudatsi, but Matthew, who was standing next to Gudatsi, was also shocked. At the same time, Roman, who was in Chaldea with his back facing Leonardo da Vinci, showed an expression that said, "I'm done for." Leonardo da Vinci certainly could not make a magic dress like Kalas. This was an indisputable fact. However, although it was a fact, whether or not he could say it in front of Leonardo da Vinci was another matter. By the way, the content of this projection is really bad. Leonardo da Vinci's tone was deliberately serious, giving a feeling that he was using force? The reason why Leonardo da Vinci could see it was because the screen in front of Gudatsi and Roman was transmitting the image that Gudatsi saw to Chaldea through the bracelet-type communication device worn by Gudatsi. Although the image that appeared in front of Gudatsi and the others was only a few seconds, everything in the image was the same as what Wuming had described. If the magical beasts were serious and launched an all-out attack, the humans would definitely not be able to resist. The magical beasts had gathered in large numbers, and the place where the magical beasts gathered was the nearest city to the north wall, Nippur. Therefore, the magical beasts preparing to attack the north wall was the most likely scenario. That was why Leonardo da Vinci said that the situation was bad. However, Gudatsi and Matthew did not have time to pay attention to the current situation. They were concerned about Leonardo da Vinci, who was in Chaldea, and Roman, who had not spoken since Leonardo da Vinci spoke. Leonardo da Vinci, are you okay? Matthew did not dare to directly ask Roman about the situation. He could only beat around the bush. Could it be that Dr. Roman had been killed? Gudatsi and Matthew thought of the same thing. I am the genius Leonardo da Vinci, what could happen to me? Don't worry, I asked Roman to help me make coffee. Huh? Why is Leonardo da Vinci so calm this time? Gudatsi was quite puzzled. He did not scold or attack, but just asked Roman to help him make coffee? Could it be that Leonardo da Vinci had developed a resistance to such things? I will unilaterally close the communication. As for the magical beasts in the projection, Chaldea still has to conduct a detailed analysis. Maybe there will be an unexpected discovery. For example, with so many magical beasts gathered, where did the commander go? Okay, Leonardo da Vinci, you go do your thing in Chaldea. Then, Leonardo da Vinci unilaterally closed the communication. After the communication was disconnected, Gudatsi and Matthew were relieved. From Leonardo da Vinci's words, she did not seem to be angry this time. However, Wuming noticed some details and sighed helplessly in his heart. Roman, you have to hold on. In Chaldea's control room, Roman pulled Leonardo da Vinci's arm that was handcuffed to his neck. His face was a little red, and he struggled hard to not be strangled. Leonardo da Vinci looked at the screen in front of him with a smile. After confirming that the communication was closed, he let go of the arm that almost strangled Roman to death. Cough cough. Cough 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 cough. Da Vinci's dear. Cough cough. Do you want to kill me? Roman laid on the table in front of him as if he was saved. He kept coughing and spoke weakly. He was just a human, and Leonardo da Vinci was a servant. Even the weakest servant's strength was not comparable to that of a human. Ah, it would be great if Mr. Roman could be strangled to death, Leonardo da Vinci said with a smile. People who didn't know would think that he was concerned about someone. Sure enough, Leonardo da Vinci said that he was fine, but his body was particularly in line with his thoughts. Roman felt that if it wasn't for the screen between Wu Ming and Leonardo da Vinci, even if the other party was Wu Ming, Leonardo da Vinci would still dare to go up. I have collected the projection just now, don't forget to analyze it, Leonardo da Vinci said, picked up a cup of coffee on the corner of the table and left. She really went to make coffee just now. Really, leaving things to me again. But when he thought that he just survived Leonardo da Vinci's capture, he didn't say anything more. Roman got up and went to the corner of the table, picked up another cup of coffee on the corner of the table. Leonardo da Vinci didn't just make a cup of coffee. Roman noticed that the staff of Chaldea had turned their eyes to him. Work hard. Then, he reprimanded them in a neither light nor heavy tone. Yes, sure enough, it didn't have much effect, but everyone still gave Roman face and immediately retracted their gaze. Only Roman, who seemed to have accepted his fate, returned to his seat tiredly. Chapter 948. In Zhuge Kong Ming's workshop, after Gadotsi and Matthew disconnected from Chaldea, they looked at Wu Ming. Assassin, what should we do now? Senior Villo, there are so many magical beasts, we can't just leave them alone. Gadotsi and Matthew directly regarded Wu Ming as their backbone. After making Collis put away the projection, Wu Ming folded his arms and leaned against the smooth wall. We definitely can't just leave them alone, but I can't make up my mind. Under the puzzled eyes of Gadotsi and Matthew, Wu Ming raised his hand and pointed to Gilgamesh, who was standing on the side. Because of his clear vision, Gilgamesh didn't get close to Collis's projection like Gadotsi and Matthew did. Gilgamesh naturally didn't move in the slightest. At this moment, although Gadotsi and Matthew were a little far away from Gilgamesh, they still saw Gilgamesh's expressionless face. Oh, it's over. It seems that our king Gilgamesh is angry, Wu Ming whispered to Gadotsi and Matthew with a mischievous smile. At this moment, Wu Ming resembled Merlin. But it was indeed their fault. The Uruk king was clearly here, and they knew that the magical beasts were about to attack, but they didn't discuss it with the king. Instead, they looked for someone else. This was a crime of disrespect. Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but gulp, and a trace of cold sweat appeared on their foreheads. Obviously, they remembered the scene when they first met Gilgamesh and were almost beaten to death. Noticing Gadotsi and Matthew looking at him, and then looking at Wu Ming's mischievous smile, Gilgamesh, who was originally thinking about something, instantly understood what was going on. Don't worry about this, king, you two can discuss it with Yunriyong. Then, Gilgamesh walked to the other side and called Zhuge Kong Ming. Counselor, tell this king about your plan for the Dinger. Yes, king. While talking, the two walked to the corner on the other side. I was scared to death. I didn't expect King Gilgamesh to not hold me accountable. Gadotsi patted her slightly raised chest and wiped the sweat on her forehead with the other hand. Sure enough, Gilgamesh is really a virtuous king. Although he was strict with others, he was stricter with himself. However, Matthew's words seemed to have exposed something. Could it be understood that she had never regarded Gilgamesh as a virtuous king? In short, as you can see, my status in the Uruk is actually not low, so you don't have to worry about making Gil unhappy by discussing it with me." Gudatsi and Matthew both looked at Wuming with resentment. At this moment, the two of them knew that Wuming obviously guessed this result, which was why he stood by and gloated. But when it was time to deal with business, they still had to deal with business. "By the way, assassin, what should we do in the face of the demonic beast's attack this time?" Because she became the governor of Emperor Nero in the Roman singularity, Gudatsi had a little experience in this kind of large-scale battle, but Gudatsi was still better at small team combat. After all, she was the master. However, even Gudatsi could see that with so many demonic beasts, and with the help of the demonic beast commander, it would be easy to break through the north wall. This was no longer a question of whether they could defend the north wall. The number of demonic beasts was like a natural disaster. Even if they used 300 people to stop tens of thousands of people, Leonidas I, who was good at defense, couldn't stop the natural disaster, right? If I can do it, then it will be easy. Although Wuming could probably stop these demonic beasts by using the method he used to kill the demonic beast commander, Ulidim, the north wall might completely collapse. In other words, there would be no way to defend the north wall next time. Moreover, this was the situation without taking into account the demonic beast commander. If there was a demonic beast commander, then the situation would be even worse. I think that the reason why the demonic beasts gathered together and prepared to launch an all-out attack is probably because the number of demonic beasts in the southwest and northeast wall was greatly reduced. They even lost 2 demonic beast commanders, so the other side is probably anxious. That's why they were preparing to take down the Uruk from the north wall in one fell swoop. Let the feathered god and Ishtar support the north wall. Let Ishtar release the sky bull. During this time, I will try to find Funbaba. At that time, the north wall will definitely be defended. Maybe we can even use this opportunity to kill the other side. As we said that, a cold light flashed in the corner of our eyes. There were only 5 demonic beast commanders left, including the one using Enkidu's body. If they gathered their strength, it wasn't impossible to eliminate all the demonic beast commanders. However, at this time, Gilgamesh interrupted Wuming's words. "I'm afraid that's not possible." Wuming, Gudatsi, and Matthew turned their heads to look at Gilgamesh, who was walking towards them. Behind him was Zhuge Kongming, who had a worried expression, as if something big had happened. Gilgamesh was holding a clay tablet in his clawed hand. His body was surrounded by the golden ripples of the Gate of Babylon, and the tablet looked like it had just been taken out of the Gate of Babylon. This king's tablet can be connected to the words on the tablet that this king left in the Uruk. In short, it was like a modern text message. Gilgamesh casually threw it to Wuming. The owner of the tablet in the Uruk is Siduri. This is an emergency communication tool prepared in case something happens when this king goes out. After all, the magical beasts had changed a lot. Although Gilgamesh still went out during his rare free time, he would also leave an emergency communication tool. While Wuming was reading the message on the tablet, Gudatsi and Matthew also came over. However, the two of them couldn't understand it, so they could only let Wuming read it to them. The jungle is in an emergency. A large number of magical beasts are attacking. Wuming couldn't help but frown. After so many magical beasts in the poor city in the north, they could still arrange magical beasts to attack the jungle in the south. How many magical beasts did the goddess of Warcraft produce? Wuming finally understood. The plan of the magical beast commanders had never changed. Just as Merlin said, the magical beasts might set up multiple routes as the main force to encircle and attack. The magical beasts gathered in Nippur City were indeed the main force, but the main force couldn't be in one place. As long as the magical beast commanders had enough soldiers, the main force could be set up in multiple places. The magical beasts attacking the jungle in the south were another main force. The magical beasts want to attack us from both the north and the south. It seemed that the magical beasts really wanted to take down the Uruk along with the Quetzalcoatl, and they seemed to have the strength to do so. There's no time to delay. Tachika Fujimaru, Matthew Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh looked serious and turned to Gadotsi and Matthew. You two return to the Uruk, and take Merlin and Anna to the jungle in the south to support the Quetzalcoatl. The vacation is temporarily cancelled. When the magical beasts are defeated, the vacation will be doubled. Yes, King Gilgamesh. Chapter 949. Gadotsi and Matthew responded, but just as they were about to move, Wuming pressed on their shoulders. I'll send you there. Wuming had been to the southern Quetzalcoatl's jungle, and also to the Uruk. He could use the portal to pick people up and send them directly to the southern jungle. However, Gilgamesh rejected Wuming's suggestion. No, you have other more important tasks, so you must stay here. Wuming frowned subconsciously. He felt that it wouldn't take much time to send them there, but since Gilgamesh said so, there must be a reason. In the next second, Gilgamesh said the reason. Although the southern jungle is in an emergency, the tropical rainforest is a natural barrier, so it's not that serious. On the contrary, we may be attacked by a large number of magical beasts at any time. If the northern wall was breached, then humans would be completely finished. Without the defense of the northern wall, magical beasts could invade humans at any time and anywhere. In other words, Wuming had to stay in the northern wall as insurance. At this moment, Wuming could only accept his fate. Then, Wuming turned to look at Gadotsi and Matthew. In that case, you can only find a way to rush to the southern jungle. Don't worry about this king will let Siduri take Fujimaru, Merlin, and the others to the jungle. Gilgamesh interrupted with confidence. As for how to send Gadotsi and the others to the southern jungle, Wuming didn't know. But since Gilgamesh said so, it must be certain. With his hands crossed, Gilgamesh walked in front of Gadotsi and Matthew, and his tone became stern. This is your second mission, and I don't want to see the same result as the first mission, do you understand? Yes. Gilgamesh's serious look had a big impact on Gadotsi and Matthew. The two couldn't help but straighten their backs and answer Gilgamesh. Finally, Zhuge Kongming spoke. Then, let me help you return to the Uruk from here. Gadotsi and Matthew were puzzled. It was already very fast to pass through the passage. Did Zhuge Kongming have a faster way? Zhuge Kongming came to one of the 8 stone platforms placed in the center. He opened the stone platform like opening a box and took out a strange wooden tool that looked like a cart with a wooden bull's head. Following the same pattern, Zhuge Kongming took out another similar tool from another stone platform as if he was opening a box. However, this tool had a wooden horse's head. Mr. Kongming, what's this? Matthew didn't recognize what it was. Zhuge Kongming took out a feather fan from somewhere. He held the feather fan and waved it as he spoke. The item I made is called Wooden Ox Horse. Wooden Ox Horse. Is that the wooden ox horse? Gadotsi was shocked. Although it's not a noble artifact, it's almost there. Zhuge Kongming nodded. He wasn't surprised that Gadotsi and Matthew from the future knew about the wooden ox horse. Anyone who had read the novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, or knew about Zhuge Kongming would know about the existence of the wooden ox horse. However, there were different opinions about the inventor. Some said that Zhuge Kongming's wife, Huang Yueying, invented it. Some said that Zhuge Kongming invented it himself, and some said that the two of them invented it together. But who invented it wasn't the main point. The main point was that the wooden ox-horse was a transportation tool that wasn't worse than modern times. It could travel 30 miles for groups and dozens of miles for special travelers. That was the evaluation of the wooden ox-horse. The general idea was simple and clear. Anyway, it could quickly transport goods. As long as the two of you sit on it, you can reach Uruk from the passage in an instant. Gudatsi and Matthew were shocked by Zhuge Kongming's words. Could it really be that fast? Seeing a trace of doubt in their eyes, Zhuge Kongming didn't explain too much. They would know after using it. Anyway, the two of you sit on it first. Zhuge Kongming waved his feather fan, and the two wooden ox horses beside him instantly moved. They rushed directly behind Gudatsi and Matthew, gently bumped their legs, and directly put the two people who subconsciously squatted in the back pocket of the wooden ox horse. Wait a minute. It's a little crowded. After all, it was used to transport goods. Although it could carry people, the space on the back of the wooden ox horse was a little narrow. The two couldn't adjust their bodies for a while. It was as if their butts had sunk into the toilet bowl, and they looked quite embarrassed at the moment. Fortunately, Gudatsi was wearing a formal dress, and Matthew was wearing a heroic spirit costume, otherwise they would definitely be exposed. However, even if they weren't exposed, the embarrassment brought about by the limited cooperation between the two of them could still stimulate some perverted desires. Before Gudatsi and Matthew could fully adjust their bodies, Zhuge Kongming immediately ordered the wooden ox horse. There's no time to lose, let's go. In an instant, the two wooden ox horses carrying Gudatsi and Matthew rushed directly in the direction of the gate that everyone had entered before at a speed faster than a modern sports car, but strangely, there was a wall there. Zhuge Kongming snapped his fingers, and a part of the wall automatically split open, forming a door, allowing the two wooden ox horses to rush out. Ah! Gudatsi and Matthew screamed from the door that had not yet closed. Wuming estimated that it was almost the same feeling as riding a roller coaster. I've modified this path. Not only can it shorten the distance and increase the speed of travel, but it's also a branch that my stone formation 8 formations can cover underground. More importantly, this path can make the wooden ox move faster. I see, that's why it can return to the Uruk in an instant. Wuming nodded silently, but Wuming was quite interested in the branch that Zhuge Kongming mentioned. According to Zhuge Kongming, Stone Army 8 formations probably relied on this so-called branch to extend and cover more than half of Mesopotamia. Counselor, is there only one branch? Wuming felt that since this passage was a branch that covered more than half of Mesopotamia, there should be more than one. After all, this branch alone couldn't cover all of it. This passage is specially connected to the Uruk, and there are 7 other endings that connect to 7 places on the northern wall. Chapter 950. After Zhuge Kongming finished, he snapped his fingers again, and 7 doors suddenly appeared on the stone walls around the magic workshop. If the door leading to the Uruk was included, there were exactly 8 doors. And looking at it carefully, the 8 doors corresponded to the 8 stone platforms in the center one by one. It seemed that there was some kind of connection between the 8 doors and the 8 stone platforms. This was probably the so-called formation. These 7 tunnels were opened by me using wooden oxen and flowing horses. They extend in all directions and cover the land behind the north wall. It turned out that wooden ox could be used like this. It was worthy of being a prop made by a servant. It could be used as a tool to dig tunnels. It was really tough. Moreover, the passages of the other 7 doors are completely connected to each other. So, the soldiers in the north wall can be deployed quickly. In other words, the passages of these 7 doors were the same as the one connected to the Uruk. It had a similar effect of acceleration. According to Zhuge Kongming's previous statement, The ends of these 7 passages were connected to 7 places near the north wall. In this way, these passages could not only be used as branches for the stone formation to cover the underground, but also allow the soldiers to move quickly. Deployment, support, supply, etc. could be completed very quickly. Moreover, these passages were connected to 7 places in the north wall. With Leonidas I's defense and Zhuge Kongming's strategy, it was not unreasonable for the north wall to not be breached until today. My king, do you want to go to the north wall or return to the Uruk? I still have 6 wooden ox. No matter where you want to go, I can send you there in an instant. Of course it's the Uruk, idiot. This king is relieved to leave the north wall to Leonidas. But if this king and Siduri are not in the Uruk, it will be chaotic. This was not a lie. Although Gilgamesh going to the north wall could increase the morale of the soldiers, the overall situation was still more important. As Gilgamesh just said, Siduri will take Gudatsi and others to the southern jungle. If there was no one in the Uruk who could control the overall situation, something would definitely happen. But this king doesn't need your wooden ox. This king can go back by himself. After Gilgamesh finished, he threw himself into the door and was buried in the darkness of the passage. But after seeing how Gudatsi and Matthew were sent back, who would want to ride Zhuge Kongming's wooden ox? In that case, I will go directly to the north wall. After stretching his body, Wu Ming looked at Zhuge Kongming. Is there a direct passage to the surface? You can go directly to the north wall. Wu Ming was going to go to the north wall to see the situation before making a decision. However, when Wu Ming left, the north wall was not built yet, so Wu Ming couldn't use the portal. Moreover, this place was still deep underground. Although Wu Ming had the ability to drill out of the ground, he couldn't really do it. Zhuge Kongming seemed to be a little obsessed with the wooden ox. Gilgamesh didn't succeed, so Zhuge Kongming started to attack Wu Ming. I can use it, however. Zhuge Kongming just said a few words, but he was directly interrupted by Wu Ming. No, I am quite confident in my speed. The scene fell into silence. I see. In that case, follow my wooden ox. It will guide you to the right way to the north wall. Please. After that, Zhuge Kongming opened another stone platform and took out a new wooden ox, and Wu Ming followed the wooden ox into one of the 7 passages. So, what should I do next? Zhuge Kongming muttered to himself. After all, Gilgamesh didn't give him any orders before leaving. While thinking, Zhuge Kongming couldn't help but turn his eyes to the only modified divine power seal, Dinger, placed in the center of his workshop, and fell into silence. On the other side, Wu Ming, who was moving very quickly with the wooden ox, also found the light in front. We probably reached the surface. At the same time, Wu Ming also found that the wooden ox that led him began to turn back. It seemed that he should have reached his destination. Kalas, can you speculate our current location? Wu Ming's dragon horn headdress made a beep sound, then it turned into a female voice. Master, we are currently near the Euphrates River. There are life signs around us. The characteristics of life signs are human. Preliminary inference is that this place is similar to the rear supply barracks. It seems that the wooden ox didn't take Wu Ming to the north wall. It just gave Wu Ming a random exit that connected to the surface. However, this was indeed in line with Wu Ming's previous request. But Wu Ming thought that there were no additional exits. He originally thought that he would reach the north wall when he reached the surface. It turns out that there are other exits besides the north wall. Zhuge Kongming didn't even say anything, but thinking about it carefully, Zhuge Kongming did only say that the end of the 7 passages is located at the north wall. Zhuge Kongming didn't lie, but at the same time, he didn't say everything. In short, although Wu Ming wasn't indirectly cheated by Zhuge Kongming, it was still a small joke that wasn't serious. That old fox, he must have taken the opportunity to retaliate against me because I rejected him. With a helpless smile, Wu Ming didn't care about this anymore. After all, it was just a harmless joke. Walking toward the place where there was light, Wu Ming found that this was actually the interior of a large tent. Wu Ming had seen such a tent before. There were such tents near the north wall. Wu Ming also saw carts full of supplies being pushed out of the tents before. It turns out that those tents are actually the exits of the passage. The troops here were judged by Collis to be the logistics troops, and they could definitely reach the north wall from this passage. This also explained where the supplies came from. It seems that Zhuge Kongming was not just holed up in his workshop in the past 3 months when he was summoned by Gilgamesh. Whether it was the wooden ox or the underground maze-like passages, they were all personally planned by Zhuge Kongming. Perhaps there were also entrances to the underground passages in the logistics barrack. Zhuge Kongming is really a great strategist. He is really thoughtful about logistics. This was the so-called, before the troops and horses move, the provisions will move first. In that case, I will rely on my own strength to go to the north wall. Wu Ming said a few words to the people in the logistics camp. Then, under their respectful and shocked gazes, Wu Ming flew up into the sky and headed for the northern wall. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.